All right, here we are. This is the first day of Cyndaquil attempts, which is pretty cool. I mean, I did Cyndaquil attempts yesterday, but I still don't need to have today. Okay, wait, hold on. Turn all this off. So I changed two things. I lowered the desktop audio because it sounded like it was pretty loud, and then I also moved my mic closer. Maybe I back it up a little bit more because I'm speaking a little bit louder to compensate. If I speak at this volume, then this mic is good. Okay, I will speak at this volume the whole time. Yeah, so I lowered desktop audio because when I was like linking back and looking at the podcast, you literally just hear the podcast. Couldn't really hear me super clearly. So we're gonna listen to. I think there's a new. Let's see. There's a new strategist. There should also be a new power in politics. This one's 50 minutes. Okay, we got 2 hours of content. I don't think we're gonna get through both of it though. No, I don't want to. Okay. Yeah, 1 hour long strategists. This is a show exclusively about. Well, it's not exclusively. It's about Alberta politics, which is infinitely more interesting than Canadian politics. I mean, than Ontario politics. Honestly, Alberta just kind of goes hard sometimes. So I like, and the guy's like pretty funny as well. I think Corey and Steven, they both like know their stuff and they seem pretty intelligent. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm also getting better about putting chat up because I messed it up last time. People were talking in chat and I just wasn't paying attention because I didn't think anyone was gonna watch. Also, I need a better nickname theme for like, because Kenny doesn't make sense because Cyndaquil is actually gonna be like a really big part of this team. So maybe is this Doug? Is it Dougie? No, it's on fire. We need someone with like energy. Doug Ford doesn't have energy. Who's hot right now in politics? Actually, he's the hottest in politics right now, though, is Doug Ford. The thing is, it could be argued that he's like Cyndaquil's kind of like a fad, because like, we haven't used him very much. So we could name him Polyev. It'd be kind of funny. I also kind of don't want people getting the wrong impression. Like if they click on, they see my Cyndaquil's name Polyev for some reason. Like I'm a big Polyev stan or something. I hate the guy. I think he's so brain dead. He's gonna turn Canada into Turkey. How about? How do I do someone I like? Who do I like that's hot? I could do Matthew Green. It's like a big player. Am I saying that right? Wait, I didn't just mess up one of my like. Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, we could name him Green, Mr. Like. He's like a pretty big player. He's 41. I didn't realize that. Oh, he was on Power Play last night? Wait, we might actually change and watch Power Play instead of Politics and Power. We might listen to Power Play instead, because I kind of want to hear Matthew Green talk. Yeah, it might be Power Play night. Damn. Okay. I'm glad I liked him. Okay, now I have to name him Matthew Green. Should I go with Green or should I think Green doesn't make any sense because he's fire type. Just go with Matthew as a male as well. Imagine as female. Oh no. Would have all meant nothing. Okay. Let's listen. Going in.
This is a Strategist, episode 998. My name is Zane Belgian. With me, as always,
Yep.
Corey
Sounds like a good volume.
Carter. Guys, I'm in Toronto. It's 11 p.m. at night. But you know what? I'm here for the team. I'm always here for the team.
Yeah.
I make every sacrifice necessary.
There you go.
I push off the recording. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know.
What were you doing until 11 o'clock at night in Toronto? You couldn't even be checked into your hotel room. I imagine something scandalous.
Can I tell you something? There's this fucking tech conference here, and there's so many fucking crypto bros everywhere. I can spot them. Carter.
A lot of Polyev fans.
Because they can't afford to get into an Uber?
They're trying anything they can.
I really like that.
They're all taking public transit to the hotel rooms that they booked 2 months ago for this conference.
Yeah,
Carter. They're
trying to stay in groups now.
Oh my goodness!
There's 6 people to a room.
It's 2 versions of themselves: the ones who booked the hotels 3 months ago, and the versions who've showed up to this conference now. I feel like I can sense the dichotomy in their personality and their economic condition on their face. Corey, it's quite something. How have you guys been doing?
It's good. Good.
Yeah,
it was
really good. Yeah.
It's Father's Day, so I did the most dad things possible. I took a nap on the couch, mowed my lawn, watched Slow Horses on Apple Plus. That's pretty good.
It's really good.
That is a very compelling White Father's Day.
Show.
Carter, did you also have a very good White Father's Day?
I was still in Surrey because, as you know, I was in Surrey when.
What is
not have a good
happening?
White Father's Day. That is a Brown Father's Day. Correct.
But I'll tell you something. I found some amazing restaurants, so I'm pretty happy overall.
I can't believe you found boiled cabbage in Surrey, BC.
Sorry.
Listen, there's some great food in Surrey, BC. I'm eating it all. And I'm going to be 10 pounds heavier by the end of this campaign.
Can I just say that I've heard a lot of feedback about your episode that you did without me, and the people have spoken, Corey. I'm needed on the show. That is the overwhelming feedback that we're getting. But
that
Carter,
was Corey and I both calling you and saying, we need you back.
Yeah.
I can't do another show just with this asshole. I need you to be in the middle.
I feel like you covered a lot of terrain. Let's move it on to our first segment. We've got a lot to talk about. Our first segment, not all press is good press. Stephen Carter, I want to talk
talking about me? Are we talking about me?
Stephen Carter, I want to talk about a deep dive into your life, your professional life.
Okay, this is better.
Carter,
Sorry.
I want to talk about Michelle Rempel because here's what I'll say. 2 weeks ago, this was.
Wait, is this a good?
A week ago, it was compelling. It's now kind of starting to get boring. All the Michelle Rempel will she, won't be pressed, and I want to kind of take a quasi deep dive. We'll see how long this goes. But Carter, let's even escape the
Physical
Cyndaquil.
Cyndaquil.
Michelle Rempel's condition in terms of how she might enter this race, should she? I want to kind of maybe stress test the notion that there is an end point. There is a certain sense of dissipation with someone anticipating to jump into a race.
Well, before we get there, I mean, for the benefit of anybody who's not knee-deep in the Alberta UCP leadership race, this is for, to run to be Premier of Alberta, effectively, to run for the UCP leadership. Current Oklahoma MP Michelle Garner-Rempel is planning to potentially jump into the provincial race.
That is right. And Carter, I wanted you to get your take first on this, which is, talk to me about this. Is this strategic right now? All the stories that we're seeing going on to perhaps week 2.5? Or is this starting to get boring? And what's the strategy at play here? And how would you have done it if Michelle Rempel's an eventual running in the race for her? So I know I've asked you 3 questions. Give me your analysis first.
I've already heard people talk about Michelle so many times already.
Last Thursday, I
feel like it's kind of like a snooze fest at this point.
Really hit the crescendo, and my thinking was she had about 7 days on her ticking clock. Tomorrow would be an absolutely fine day to launch. Wednesday would be good to launch. Thursday would starting to be pushing it. But overall, I think that she's probably going to be in this race. She certainly is indicating.
Moving over to this strategy,
perhaps the wrinkle that's keeping her out of it is
the mouse and
she actually
trolls.
has the right membership requirements. Has she been member long enough of the
Because that way it's
UCP,
like a point decision
to actually run for the leadership, which would be kind of a staggering blow if she needed to get a special dispensation from the UCP board.
It's 12. It shouldn't be.
To actually run in the race. So we'll see. Sorry, my house is on fire.
Are you finally being arrested? Is that Flair Airlines finally sending the authorities after us?
Yeah, no, it's my house is on fire. It's not a big thing. I'm sure things will work its way out. You know, we'll be fine.
I'm great, Carter. No, I'm glad your commitment is to the pod first and foremost. Corey, talk to me about this. We'll talk about the specifics, Michelle Rempel-Garner, as you've mentioned her bid or potential bid to replace Jason Kenney as the leader of the UCP and in turn becoming the next premier. But Corey,
I heard someone say they would like follow Michelle Gardner into
the anticipation campaign
into a burning building, which sounded a little silly to me. But people seem to like her a lot.
Not meet the crescendo moment. She put out a tweet thread that said, "I'm interested," and then there was
oh yeah, this tweet thread too. Did she? Which she hasn't even launched it, has she?
Okay, well, I think in some ways you might be looking at it backwards. You're assuming why would you do that and then not launch, and what's the point of that, and how ridiculous. But maybe look at it from a different point of view.
Maybe she's actually not thinking about launching.
The one that Stephen Carter just teased out there, where there's some speculation that she'll need a waiver because she doesn't have a UCP membership for at least 6 months. Now, if that's the case, and as everybody is entering the race and people are starting to firm up, you need to find a way to signal that you're interested in the race too, without going so far as to say you're in the race in case for whatever reason you don't hit those membership requirements. So in some ways, this was her placeholder. This was her save the date for my leadership.
Oh, like she might not physically be allowed in the thing. That's kind of crazy.
Along the way, I think there's been some reporting that the UCP caucus is going to meet on this residency requirement tomorrow. I have no idea if that's true. I don't know why I'm repeating it. I just saw it on Twitter. But if that's the case, if you're her, do you really want 2 weeks to pass from the Sonny campaign launch and
the Sonny campaign launch,
and Taves has launched even a week before that, and all of those people being in the race, and you're not yet, and you're not even mentioned yet because you're waiting to figure out.
Is this a Destiny video I want to watch?
By the time you're actually able to announce,
there's a lot of stuff I want to watch tonight, but I don't have a lot of time.
People have picked sides.
So much content.
Late. They picked their dance partner because they think this is the field. And so this was her way of signaling that's what the field was while she worked through these issues. And I mean, it was last Thursday. Talk about hyper intense news cycles if we're thinking by Monday. God, you haven't announced yet? You said you were thinking about it like 3 days ago. I think. But
in fairness, Corey, the Monday was her first action. The drip campaign of surrogates and other proxies and that momentum building started it was clearly engineered much before that. And that's what I'm talking about. Right, because there was the pre-chapter before let me put out my initial sort of tweet thread around consideration.
Yeah, and so for sure, and actually I think one of the more damning things, and I almost allowed myself to get distracted by it, is it's not like nobody knew when the date of Jason Kenney's leadership review was. It's not like anybody knew didn't know there wouldn't be a leadership contest this year, potentially.
Sure, yeah.
Why in the world did she not buy a membership when the calendar year flipped over? Why wasn't she keeping that current if she harbored even a modest amount of interest in the job?
That is true.
You have to know there's going to be a membership requirement. That's like every party. That's like every leadership. It seems unfathomable to me that she wouldn't have at least, if this is something that even remotely interested her, and of course it does, as we know, why would you not maintain your membership in the party? How fucking crazy is that?
Carter, let's talk about the specifics here, because Michelle Rempel-Garner had a choice here, whether it was to spend that $15 on a UCP membership or season tickets to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think she chose the latter, Carter. I think it's safe to say she chose the latter. No Westbrook, no Harden, Carter.
Everybody knows both of those choices are a real waste of money. I'm shocked.
Yeah, it's pretty true. I mean, one of them you get to pick the premier of Alberta, though. So
I mean, maybe she thought that. I'm intrigued because she is very involved in Patrick Brown's
basically pay $15 to pick the premier of Alberta. It's kind of crazy.
Consideration of the UCP leadership.
Right, but I think that 3 months ago she thought everything was going to come out differently. She thought
Kenny was going to win.
Her focus would be on getting Patrick
just
Brown
focus on Patrick
or
Brown,
someone else elected as leader.
But you still spend the $15.
That she was standing against
I don't know.
Pierre Poilievre.
Like that feels like such a huge mistake.
About all kinds of different things, which is what is this signaling about what's happening in the Conservative Party of Canada? What's happening in the federal party, right? We've seen all of this ties together. This isn't just This isn't just a decision where she's trying to think, should I or shouldn't I? Let's keep in mind.
I think we beat Faulkner today.
Kenny decided to come and
Faulkner seems pretty easy to beat.
He too
honestly,
was facing a potential leadership opportunity.
I'm gonna get confident
away from that
kill myself.
because I believe he was polling at less than 1%.
Because we're not in the mindset of playing this game yet. I honestly haven't played it that much. Like the 2 hours we did was like nothing.
People did not like him, and they did not want him. It just took those of us in Alberta a few more years to realize that.
Corey, let's get your take on this, because from the perspective of
also like the new lighting change, so I'm not like flashbanging every 5 seconds.
There's probably that element of like just the negligence, but then there's also the party side of it in terms of what they debate, what they should do. So give me your take on the fact that she doesn't have it. How big of a blemish is this? And then let's start getting into the strategy discussion for the party. What's best for them? What should her opponents say or not say? What would you be doing right now if you're Michelle Rempel-Gardner? Anything different than what she's done right now, which is telegraphing that, hey, listen, I don't have this membership, and you guys need to figure it out for me.
Well, I think that when you're a sitting Conservative MP, nobody's going to give you too hard a time about not having a current membership, as long as it's like you have in the past. Maybe it's lapsed for a bit. Maybe you bought it 3 months ago, but you didn't buy it 6 months ago. I don't think that's a huge deal. It does seem like a bit of an omission, like I said, if this is something that interests you. But, party memberships are funny too. Some run on 12-month cycles. Some are calendar year. Maybe she just lost track of it all. Maybe it doesn't matter at all. I don't think it's going to hold her back. I don't think people are going to say, wow, what a foolish leadership contest or contestant. But, it does sort of speak to an overall, what's the strategy and preparedness here? And it makes you wonder, what does this launch look like? So let's just say my theory was correct, and she's just looking to drag the puck a bit. Keep it interesting, keep herself in the conversation until she's able to announce when she goes and announces. What does that launch look like at this point? Is it going to be the same as we've seen with everybody else, which is just the kind of the 150 people in a room or at a media event? Or is she going to try to do something different? I think one of the challenges with the approach that she's taken, and maybe this gets back to your original point of it, like, isn't this enough? For me, it's not so much it's boring. It's that when you build that crescendo,
you need cool lava with quick attack in order to beat not only
if you're doing
Rattata, but also
please, I'm gonna run, I'm
Totodile.
gonna run. And then at the end, it's just this underwhelming, like, oh, actually, I decided to run. My tweet thread was the launch. That's kind of lame.
My tweet thread was the launch. Giga Chad.
That's exactly what I was trying to say, which is like,
make your tweet thread the launch. Do it.
Is she setting herself up for failure in a sense, right? Like, is she setting herself up, unless she like has a big swing or a big hit, does that launch automatically raise the bar on herself, Carter?
Well, of course it. Well,
I like these guys. Sometimes I feel like they're like schizophrenic with like their launches and stuff. I'm like, guys, I'm not sure if it's that serious.
So now the answer has to include
Caterpie. Honestly, her stats are so bad, I could see us not killing it. I'm gonna run.
In that she said, I'm interested, but I've got to get through some things here. And now those things
like we're
are
adamant.
going to be
we're adamant and cynical
about, instead of what the launch should be about, which is your message and how you're going to carry yourself forward.
Right. So you're saying that the process of her getting to the launch will be as much part of it as her message. Adamant. Out there. Carter, I think you were going.
This is like a perfect cynical though.
I don't know. I was talking with some people who were suggesting that if Michelle Rempel chose to come in, it would fundamentally change the complexion of the race. This race that we see is kind of bundling up in a big roll up where, Taves is going to be left at the front of the race without anybody to roll up into him. There seems to be this sense that if Michelle came in, she would be not necessarily the leader on the first ballot, but she'd certainly be in a position where she could roll up an awful lot of votes. And maybe, in fact, even if she's not number one heading into the first ballot, or number one heading into the instant runoff, she would be someone who is seen as the most likely to accumulate votes, the highest profile member, the highest profile potential leadership candidate, and the one who will be able to roll up votes. So for me, it changed my thinking about her launch, because then it's really about creating enough demand, right? So if you're being pulled into the race, it's different than pushing yourself into the race. So Sonny has pushed herself into the race. Taves has pushed himself into the race. Brian Jean and Danielle Smith probably were the ones who pushed themselves into the race the hardest. And now you've got
earliest, arguably.
Right, yeah. And those two are related. And now you've got Michelle Rempel saying, I'm not sure. Maybe that's an opportunity for people to be pulling her into the race. Maybe she's using this, and she's a savvy political operator. Maybe she's using this to ensure her money's going to be lined up, to make sure that she's got her volunteers in place. to make sure that the demand side for her entry into the race is strong enough, so that when she does her launch, it's not 150 people in her home riding. It's actually a big launch. It's actually something that's going to have some.
It's not a
sustained
banner
power.
with pictures
So
of
are you buying
yourself.
that? Like, are you buying that what she's trying to do is set up a, like, I'm the candidate that they wanted to draft, and then they got me? They finally got me. You know, they convinced me. They showed me the money. They showed me the energy. Yes, I'll be your savior sort of thing. Do you feel like that's the game she's playing here? And if so, are you buying how she's selling it?
Well, I'm not that skeptical of it. It's very possible. I mean, it's one of the oldest leadership cliches. You know,
Yeah.
ask me once, ask me twice, ask me thrice. Okay, you twisted my arm. I guess I must do it. The people demand it, right? I mean, this goes back to the times of the Romans, and I'm sure earlier. This notion that you get forced into leadership. It's why. When a new speaker is elected, you kind of faux drag them to the front. All of this bullshit. I just don't know that that's a very effective strategy in 2022, right?
Yeah.
I just don't know that people are sitting there really in doubt as to people's intentions when every thought we have is on Twitter and we've got analysis on analysis and spin on spin, and everybody's been talking about the possibility of a Michelle Rempel campaign since since the last leadership. She's always been on these lists of people, and so maybe not. It just, to me, it
You like the
speaks.
clicks of my mouse,
Well, I
guys?
don't know. Let's put it this way:
And then chat, right? No, I
do
don't know.
we really think you need two things for this to happen, and you can create them both? Like, they're not things that you just have to sort of accept you have or not, but you have to have a high enough public stature that people say, "Oh, thank God, Michelle Rempel or Garner Rempel is in the race," right? And then you need also this notion that you're pulling to service and you're there to save them. Like this like, I'm willing to do it for the greater good of the province or the party or whatever it is there.
What a savior.
And there's a sense that
Clapper.
there's no savior.
What a hero. What a
I don't know that either condition is available.
What an absolute
there
hero.
are so many people in this race already.
We truly
it's a very
would
crowded field. I
no,
feel like the strategy of
not be in the
needing
place
to
we are today had it
is
not
more
been for
when
Michelle Rempel
you
Gardner
think that there's a field of
single-handedly
midgets and you want to bring in a
saving
giant.
all of Alberta.
The reality is, Daniel Smith has strong name recognition. Brian Jean, strong name recognition. Travis Taves, huge caucus support. And they didn't wait to see if Michelle
Travis
was going to
Taves,
enter the race.
huge caucus support.
So, I'm just not. I'm not feeling it. I guess which is not to say I don't even doubt her odds to be a good candidate. I think Stephen's right. She could be everybody's second choice, and that could very easily put her into the premier's seat. I just don't know if this is an optimal launch strategy.
Carter, I have to ask you on almost a strategist level, personal level, maybe preference level.
Okay, ask
what type of
personal.
candidate do you like to work with? Is it the one who's like, Carter, I've got a big enough ego to be like, and I know much of this is strategizing, right? But is it the candidate, I got a big enough ego, I can fucking do this? Like, let's go. Like, I need you to help me do it. Or do you like the more exploratory, argue charitably, perhaps the more humble sort of, you think I could do this? Should we put on an exploratory committee? Like, what's your vibe, and what's your, like, and why? Because I think there's insight here in terms of what I think your answer is going to be. So let me open that bracket for a second and get your insight on this before we kind of move on to the specifics of the UCP and what they should do with Rempel's candidacy.
I don't want the candidate that's worried, that's looking over their shoulder. Like, oh, I don't know, maybe someone better is going to come along. I want the candidate that says, I am the one who will save this party from themselves. I am the only one that can actually take this to the next level. And that person is interesting. That person is the one that...
but Carter, so often we criticize that person on this show and others.
We'll downplay we'll downplay that in the media. We'll downplay that in public. But I want people to come in and say, man, I've looked at the field. There is no one in this field that deserves to lead the province. I am going to have to do this. I want that level of confidence, right? And when you don't have it, it's such a burden, right? Because you're talking the person into it all the time.
Like you're hype man. You're hype manning all the time, I suspect.
You've got this. You're going to go in. It's going to be fine. You're going to be fine in the debate. Your speech is going to be great. You're doing a really good job. And then you can never give criticism. You can never give a critique, right? Because, oh my God, the facade falls off and everything is crap. and now you got to build them back up again. Give me a strong ego that I can play with, and then my ego meets their ego. We have a fight. Everything works out. My ego wins.
Corey,
I think he's
Carter,
right.
That's your preference as well.
Well, that's a great point, because I've also had to work with candidates who have had that uncertainty to it, and that.
Oh, okay,
What
I would
did
just
I do? How do you think I
Ember
did?
kills
How do
everything
you
now.
think I did? And it is very tough to manage those candidates, because to do what you need to do, you need to break them, and if you break them, you're not doing your job either. And so you do need a certain amount of ego and ability to. I mean, it's a very tough business. It's interesting as we're talking here. A general trait that I think leaders should have is that they should act sure but be uncertain. So, have confidence in these matters, but really think about, is this the right course of action? Am I actually doing the right thing? Should I proceed this way, or should I second guess that based on some new data that's come in? With many leadership candidates, they act uncertain, but they're sure. They're like, I don't know if I'm gonna do it or not. They know, they fucking know all the way.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a dance. Corey, I want to go back to the question about the
I've seen
UCP.
people
What
do
should
that
they do
before.
here?
He's not wrong.
What's best for them? What's the strategy for them? Should they just, on whenever they're meeting, right? Allegedly, should they just be like, "Fuck it, let's let her in"? It's a candidate that adds vibrance. Is it just as open and shut as that, or is there more wrinkles to it in your mind in terms of how they should process this?
I think at the end of the day, I would be floored if they didn't let her in.
They'll let her in.
Because it would just be such a horrible look, and it would
also,
look like an overly managed leadership contest.
Guys,
She's a
look.
conservative MP. It's not as though people are thinking she might be a closet
Kulava
socialist or
soy?
something like that. So you got to do it. Now, do you give her a bit of a rocky ride along the way and say, well, why didn't you buy a membership? Maybe you even have people planting doubt, like maybe she was waiting for a resurgent wild rose if she couldn't be part of this party, or just wanted to see where it landed and wasn't actually united to or committed to a united party. The party itself shouldn't say that. Maybe operatives of one of the campaigns would whisper that. You're gonna have to let her in. For sure, you got to let her in.
Carter, we got to let her in? Open and shut case?
Oh, for sure. I mean, imagine the messaging if you don't, right? No one else can beat Michelle Rempel. Like, you let her in, and if she wins, great. And if she loses, then, she should have been a member. That's what the people were looking for. This is, it's lunacy for them not to let her in.
Carter, you're a strategist on the Taves campaign. Let's use that as an example. You're a strategist on any of these campaigns. What, are you saying anything? What are you back channeling, and what are you, if anything, getting your candidate to say about a potential Rempel candidacy?
Nothing. I mean, we're focused on the people who are in the race, and realistically, at this stage, you are selling memberships, and you are going around to groups of 15 and 20. There really isn't much of a media campaign. So don't create a media campaign where you're uttering someone else's name first. The names that you're supposed to be uttering are your own. So do that, and then don't worry too much about the rest.
Corey, should Mayor Bill Rock endorse Michelle Rempel? I'm not. Corey, question here though: is there anything that you can do? And this I find interesting. With some of these long lead campaigns, in the sense of eventually trying to get in there, is there anything a competing campaign can do? Let's talk specifics about this race, but even more generally, to try to prevent someone who's going to be in from being in? Like, is there anything that you've seen in the past, you've witnessed, or is it just wasted energy to try to derail an entrant or a potential entrant? And that's what I'm kind of thinking right now. If Carter's analysis is correct, that the UCP and others feel like this is a big deal, should she enter, is there any value putting energy into derailing her eventual entry into the race, Corey?
Well, it depends on what your analysis tells you, right? If they are legitimately on the fence and you can sort of pick at the thing that puts them on the fence, then okay, that the war best one is the war not fought, right? Where you can just get your competitor off the field before the thing even begins. And we see that all of the time. Some people also are not that serious about it. They just like to be courted. They like to be asked. Think about Bernard Lord. Think about Frank McKenna. Something about those New Brunswick folk, right? They love to be courted for the big jobs. They never actually take them there. So say, for example, Michelle Rempel is thinking, I want to do it, but I'm just not sure I can sell the memberships. Well, if you get some party luminaries that she trusts to call and say, Michelle, I don't think you can sell the memberships, that may have an effect. So I wouldn't say it's pointless. I wouldn't say it's useless. I would say that depends on it actually being a legitimate review of options, and I am just too much of a cynic to believe by the time you put out the tweet storm that you're not at least thinking about it. That said, she did put out some tweets about the Conservative Party leadership, You may recall many years ago, and didn't ultimately go for that.
Carter, finish
she
us
wound up
off.
going for the interim, didn't she? Yeah. I
Finish
think
us off
that
on this.
you can you can try and get her to step out, but it's too late after she does her tweet. It actually happens way in advance of that. We have entrants coming into the Surrey race right now, and the time to get rid of them was 2 months ago. When they're, it's all rumor and it's all innuendo. Now you don't have 2 months ago in the UCP race. It's just happening too fast. But you right off the bat, you got, if you're running, you should be making the phone calls to the Conservative MPs anyways and asking them for their support. And when one of them says, I don't know, I may even consider running, you better make sure that she's not running if you want her out of your game. None of them did that. None of them were able to keep her out. So I suspect we're going to see Michelle Rempel launch. I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, especially, it might even play into Rajan Sani, or it might play into someone else's hand that instead of all of these memberships going straight to Taves, now there's some question as to whether some of them might go to Michelle Rempel, who might be more friendly to your cause. So all of this is a game of building alliances and building, like, even if someone's in, they are most likely to be your friend more than they are to be your adversary in this type of instant runoff. So no one should be worrying too much about Michelle Rempel coming in.
We're going to leave that segment there, move it on to our next segment. Uptown Funk. Carter, Corey, the Liberals seem like they're in a bit of a funk. Articles published about the demise of Justin Trudeau, Scotiabank saying that he's doing nothing about the inflation crisis, multiple ministers not looking like they're on the top of their game, Algabra in transport, Mendocino, of course, on the Emergencies Act, even Freeland getting quite a bit of criticism for her non-answers and lack of preparedness in committee, and then, of course, Melanie Joly and the bureaucrat within her department that attended a party with the Russian embassy. Carter, this is less about the facts of what's happening with the Liberal government, but more about the narrative, in a sense. And we see these every now and then, right? Like, in some days, like, as Corey and I would speak to in basketball terms, like the basket seems like it's as big as the ocean. You can't miss. In other days, in other months, in other stretches, Carter,
Okay, it's
like in
Cyndaquil on
slump where
Totodile
you
now.
just can't make a shot, and the media picks up on it, and there's a kind of a stench to what you're up to. There's almost even quasi-prescient pieces right now out saying that this is going to be a summer of for the Liberals. I want to kind of get your insider's take on this.
Let's go kill the Totodile.
This is a little bit fact, but a lot of bit story, Carter, in a sense. And how do we kind of get to these places where it just seems to coalesce? Where you kind of look at, is there this malaise or funk or sort of stink on the brand? Talk to me about this. Am I making this up in my head, or is this kind of real? And do we witness this cyclically across whatever brand color, whatever party, in all orders of government?
Very real. I mean, Chantal Hébert was just writing that, the Liberals couldn't win again under Justin Trudeau's leadership.
That's the piece I was referring to. That's right. Yeah.
These are all over the place. And are they true? No, they're not true. Are they false? No, they're not false. What they are is a reflection of 2.5 years of going through COVID. The end of a session coming, everybody seeing the finish line, everybody wanting to go home. A war in Ukraine that no one anticipated, problems on top of problems, and everybody's just fucking exhausted. And mistakes get made. So they're being made now. We're seeing them now. The session ends, on Wednesday? They can finally go home. They just need time to regroup, rethink. But you don't get time to regroup and rethink when you're in the midst of session. The opposition's got the pressure on you. The circumstances have the pressure on you. And so you're flailing a little bit. This is government. And on top of that, you're in your third term.
Not even going to pretend like it's close.
Third terms, generally speaking, don't result in fourth terms. That is kind of one of the truisms of Canadian politics.
True.
You don't win your fourth election.
Fourth terms don't happen. Fun fact.
Which is one of the reasons I was kind of like, when you're looking at that early election call from the last time when Trudeau called it, you really needed that majority because you needed that ability to go the full 4 years, or you've really wasted it, which maybe was one of the reasons why they put so much pressure on creating a deal with the NDP. But I think this is just malaise. I think they're tired. I think they want to go home. This isn't a series of structural failures where suddenly the good people that were there 2 years ago are suddenly bad people. I think that the good people that were there 2 years ago are now tired people, and we're seeing more mistakes being made as those tired people are looking at the end of a session, a very normal circumstance.
Corey, what I find interesting about this is kind of like the triangulation of the narrative. It's like coming from all different angles, from unsuspecting voices, from certainly the post media voices. And it's almost like, okay, are we highlighting these mistakes now to make the point that these people want to make? Or were these mistakes always happening and we just never cared about them, or we never really had them bubble up to the surface? I'm just kind of curious your take on like this general sort of cyclical malaise.
I'm gonna get a drink. Give me a sec. Watch the Rattata. Watch the Rattata. Okay. Sorry about that. I needed the drink. I think I might try to play Overwatch tonight. Oh, it's so loud. Okay, back to podcast.
That we might see, and do you agree if the Liberals are in a funk? And then we'll talk about the strategy related to what you do when you're inside a party and you're in one of these moments.
Well, to Carter's point, I think if you were to run a news search for articles of this nature, you'd find that there's a big surge of them at this time of year. Parliaments get tired. It happens in legislatures. It happens in the House of Commons. There's a certain exhaustion that sets in. People just want to go home. And the day-to-day job in the public service, you just stack on session on top of that. Business has to continue as well. And you just can't wait for the politicians to get out of town at a certain point, right? And they can't wait to get out of town. And people start losing their minds. And you get to this place where the House leaders stop trying to torture each other, and both are just like let's get out of here, right? Or all of them. Right? Like, let's just find a way to leave, because it becomes just too ruthlessly brutal for all parties involved. And then they'll do things like, let's just run through the night. Let's be done with it. We're out of here tomorrow. Huh? You in? You in? I'm in. You in? And we're sort of at that point. It's a point where the media sniffs malaise, because you got to keep in mind the media's in that bubble too and is dragged in there. But also they can see the fatigue and the frustration on these ministers' heads. Prep does fall. Freeland's prep no doubt has fallen, because we're all human and we all need breaks at a certain time. And it's just before the break. So this is when I think reasonably you'd expect people to be at their worst. Now, that all said, governments do die of old age, right? It's just something that happens. The shine comes off. The old tricks don't work very much. You've done all of the things you were excited to do. There are other things to do in the world, but it's tough to do that within your own brand. It's so difficult for any organization or person to reinvent themselves. That's certainly true of a prime minister as well. And so, they will often take on these third term projects which are both like more ambitious but less relevant a lot of the time, and that itself is not a ticket to popularity. So I think you can reasonably say all of this is correct. It is correct that this is just a sign of the period, of the year that we're in, but it's also a sign of the larger cycle that we're in, and the two are just aligning at this moment, right? But I mean, one of the reasons we talk so much about the CPC leadership race and say, hey, don't write off Pierre Poilievre as much as he seems outside the mainstream is governments die of old age, and at a certain point, people just say, well, what else you got? I've tried barbecue sauce. I'd like to just smear some shit on my steak for.
That's a good Poilievre analogy.
Carter, you were going to jump in on with something, but
yeah,
go ahead.
We mentioned this idea that maybe Chrystia Freeland isn't getting the briefings. There's also a point where she says, "I got this. I don't need a fucking briefing." Right? I've faced the same questions in the House of Commons for the last X number of weeks, and they haven't changed. They're not going to change. I've got this, and suddenly something shifts, and the answer is not as crisp. It's the exact same answer to a modestly different question. All of these things start to just weigh down on you, and I've seen it tons of times. It is super hard to stay focused this long with this type of group of people in an adversarial relationship. And that's one of the things I was saying earlier, about politics. Politics is adversarial. It's hard to fight all the time. I've even found it difficult to fight with the curse of politics all the time. And
you
can't.
Carter, you are needlessly getting us into shit, my friend. You are needlessly getting us into shit.
No, I need to do it. It's not needless at all. It's very important.
Carter, here's I'll start with Corey on this. Corey, do you write it out or do you push back against it? So let's say your both of your analysis is correct, right? I combine what each of you said around Corey, making the point about old age, Carter, both of you making the point about being tired. Okay, write it out, or do you push back against it? From a strategy perspective, what's the choice, Corey?
You got to know when the curtain call is coming, and I'm not saying it's there for Justin Trudeau, but at a certain point, the optimal move for everybody involved is to say, that's a wrap. My time is done. Now let's see what else can happen, because that means as a leader, you get to leave as a victor. You've won all of these elections. And as a party, that means you get to reinvent yourself and find that energy, and that, recreation is available to you. Let's be realistic. Parties try this. It doesn't often work because this fact is it's still the same party, right? Chrétien de Martin was not a seamless transition, and people did see it as a continuation. It's tough to break from the past, but it's not impossible. And I think that's the strategic answer. Human vanity gets in the way, though. The idea that, well, I could be the guy who gets 4 in a row. There's not very many who get 4 in a row. It's like me and Mackenzie King. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so, you start to, your eyes are bigger than your stomach. Pick your metaphor here, but you go one longer than you should. You stay at the roulette table a little too long. And I think that's more likely because of human nature.
Carter, so this brings up a strategic question for me. Well, 2 of them. Let me start with the first one. And this is more speculative than it is strategic, but, we do all of it on the show, Carter. Do you think conversations are happening right now with Team Trudeau and the Prime Minister himself where they're interpreting some of the stuff that they're seeing and to Corey's point, saying, guys, should we consider about, not packing it up right now, not this summer, but, hey, is this our final chapter? And if it is, are we writing it differently versus what we've been doing right now, which has perhaps just been straight up momentum carrying us from 2015? Do you feel like those conversations are happening right now?
If they haven't been happening, perhaps they should be happening. It is very difficult to have these types of conversations. But even before they called the last election, they should have had a conversation that says, very few people make it to 3, past 3, right? 3 seems to be the lucky number. So how are we going to leave this? Are you going to go for 4? Because if you're going to go for 4, it requires this type of government. It requires, being combative. And maybe they're looking at it and saying, it's going to be Pierre Poilievre. The best person to beat Pierre Poilievre is going to be Justin Trudeau. That's a reasonable calculation, but it's also very easily the wrong calculation. So I'm sure that the conversations are being held, but I'm sure they're not being quite as blunt as they should be. If it were me, I'd be blunt.
Yeah,
What's your
what would you
exit
be saying?
strategy? What's your exit strategy? When is it? How do you want to go out? Do you want to go out like Brian Mulrooney, where you've achieved all the things you've achieved, but you've saddled the party with so much negativity that no one else can take it from there? Or do you want to go out like Chrétien, where you try and hand it off properly, but it's just fumbled on the way? Do you want to try and do it like Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who handed it off and then took it back? You know, like how do you want to put this? You know, how do you want to put it all in place? How do you want to make yourself the victor? Because you should be writing the terms of your exit now, because you don't get to write the terms of your exit, you know, at some future date.
Why react to that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's the old Yogi Berra line. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up somewhere else, right? And with his closer advisors, he needs to say, how does this end? How it doesn't. I'm not saying I'm leaving. I'm not saying everybody can start talking about me being the former prime minister as I'm in the job. But how do we want to write this final chapter? And maybe it's not the final chapter, but that also requires a conversation, because I'll tell you something. I think the Liberals got somewhat jammed with this last term and going into this election. It's not just doing stuff in the term. That's not enough to get re-election. It's also a plan for the next term. And I do feel often that long-lived governments in particular, and overly ambitious governments, because they just run through everything, like the Roman candle is just shot off and they're just sitting there with an empty tube at a certain point. But they get to the election, they say, look at us, wasn't that great? And they have nothing to say about what it means to elect them going into the next 4 years. And that's a really big risk with long-lived governments. They've lived their own press for too long. They start to believe that they are the only answer to every question.
Carter, jump in on this.
Corey's describing the Alison Redford government in 2012. I mean, as much as we'd kind of come through and we had a bunch of new ideas in the leadership, those ideas in the leadership were all kind of put into the budget, and the budget was only like 15 minutes before the election. But because we passed the budget, we then jumped into the election, and people were like, yeah, we saw what you gave us in the budget. What's next? And we were like, what do you mean what's next? The budget. That was the thing that we gave you. And they're like, no. What's next? What's the next thing? I mean, you had to have a vision beyond just the moment. And it was really hard because, you know, obviously also we had the added complication of having very little in the way of our caucus supporting us. So the vision and the ideas that were proposed in the leadership didn't necessarily see universal buy-in. This is a complex business, and Trudeau might be at the most complex moment of a complex business right now.
Carter, I'm going to start with you on this final question for the segment, which is, there's probably some within the Liberal ranks right now that are looking at this malaise and saying, what could this mean for me? And me being someone who wants that job that Justin Trudeau has. Maybe I'm not a Chrystia Freeland, the one who's being touted and perhaps even crowned prematurely. But if I'm looking at this malaise, if I'm looking at this, summertime sadness almost that's being predicted for me and my party, how am I taking advantage of it? Am I taking advantage of it if I've got ambitions to fill the chair? What am I doing?
Wait, hold on. I don't think I'm meant to do this.
Talk to me about some of the things I need to be thinking about, and what should I be doing even right now?
You know, people kind of poo-poo the baby steps, but the baby steps are the things that you need to do before you can run, right? Like, you need to have an organization in place before you can, jump up and suddenly say, I'm the next leader. I mean, people are already doing this. You can see MPs going across the country and
both Bell's parents died.
And one of the reasons that you may be even starting to see this malaise taking its different forms is that people are out instead of at home, right? They are already starting to tell the story about why they would be a great leader, or why they should be the person that assembles the next great leadership team. Because keep in mind, like, you don't have to run for leader to use this type of opportunity to move yourself up the list, right? Like, you can run for, you can just simply work on someone's leadership team and find yourself in a much different position.
It's the number of IVs that they have.
So you're
all have
using
0 IVs.
This chaos, if you will, to really start to spread out what it is that you think you can achieve. And you're going to say, right now,
we're not even close to killing the city.
If I'm an MP, I'm looking at the region that I represent and deciding, am I the MP of influence? If I'm the MP of influence in the region, then whoever becomes leader is going to come through my door, right? And I'm going to build out that influence in that region. I'm going to own Calgary, or I'm going to own the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, or I'm going to, because keep in mind, the Liberals still have, a convoluted leadership system with points. If there's going to be anything but if you're a Quebec MP, you've got tremendous
looks like we go to Flame Wheel. It's probably the best option.
George Shahal and Randy Bossino have huge opportunities to make their lives a lot better. Just by taking a look at Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta and saying, we're going to be the members of parliament for all these areas.
Corey, round us out on this. The same question to you, right? You're this MP, you're a minister, you're seeing, I don't know if I'd call it chaos, Carter, but point taken, right? You're seeing this perhaps lull.
It will be chaos at some point. You may as well get ready for it.
Interesting. Well, Corey, maybe even to take Carter's thesis here to tell me if you agree with it. But what is that MP, that person in the ranks right now doing if there's a predicting sort of lull within the Liberal ranks or in the Liberal government?
One of the great things a local MP has going for them at a moment like this is that being a good soldier looks exactly like setting up a leadership bid or setting up a team to support a leadership bid.
Get out cloud cover.
Well, it doesn't even go out. Make sure constituency association yours is strong. Make sure your neighbor's constituency associations is strong. Make sure the coffers are all full. Make sure that there's a big, powerful machine. Now, you're probably going to be the one on top of that in your perfect scenario here that is able to deliver when there is a need for delivery, whether that delivery be a general election or a leadership contest. And so a strong organization is useful in a lot of contexts, right? It's like buying a computer. You don't need to just look at porn on it, Stephen. You could actually open up Excel if you wanted as well. And so get yourself that good computer so you can open it up and be appropriate to the context. Again, Stephen, don't use it for porn, particularly not in a setting like this where you're talking to your two friends.
Yeah, like you don't.
I closed that browser window. Did that still stay open?
Well, you've got a lot of reflection on your glasses. I just, we live stream now, so it matters more.
Oh,
wait, does that poison point?
I'll close that browser. My bad.
Tubin Carter, finish us on this. If you were to offer one piece of advice, crystallize this for me, because I think there's something here. Crystallize this for me. One piece of advice to someone in the Liberal ranks, what would it be as they head into summer right now? This is the individual or individuals with ambitions for taking the chair, taking the party. What would it be?
It's all the same. Build teams, right? Build teams. Whatever's going to happen in the next 4 years is going to lead to some sort of chaos. That is going to either be Justin Trudeau sticks around for one more term and tries to defeat whoever wins the Conservative Party leadership. That's going to be chaotic for you. If there's a leadership, that's going to be chaotic for you. All of them come from the same place, which is building out a structure that everybody can have confidence in. So, even if you're a former MP, right, you could see someone like Kent Hare jump back into the fray, build up Calgary Centre. Calgary Centre's, used to have the biggest war chest. Maybe it needs to have the biggest war chest again. It's got 3 years without an MP. If you want to be the MP in Calgary Centre, now's the time to let you know. Like, that's what needs to happen.
We're going to leave that segment there, move it on to our next segment. Lessons from our older dying cousins. Corey, I want to talk about the United States of America. It is a place that we used to frequent traveling. I don't know if you guys have been there in a while.
I haven't been there since 2016.
I went down there. Yeah. I went to Nashville. I don't know if you guys know, but I won some awards.
Your team won awards. Congratulations to your team, Carter. I'm saving you from yourself here. This is one of the many instances on the pod.
I won because I was there to fix them up.
Carter, I want to talk about this. We talked a bit about the January 6th hearings, Carter, from the perspective of how they're doing in terms of the committee communicating their message, right? We talked about the hiring of the former ABC News director and these videos that they're creating. But Corey, I want to talk about this poll that's out, which says 6 in 10 Americans say Trump should be charged for January 6th. And the majority of Americans, nearly the same amount.
6 in 10.
Figured that this committee was also relatively fair in how they've been proceeding with the hearings thus far. So there's two questions here, right?
It's actually
the second
pretty
one
good.
will address
Those are good numbers.
second, which is the political effectiveness of this committee. But Corey, talk to me about the overarching question here, which is really the fact that this rule of law that you've been discussing is now being kind of taken in through the political lens, like, well, fucking everything else. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, let's start with the obvious. We shouldn't be determining whether someone is prosecuted or not based on how popular that prosecution is. If we want to say we live in a society with a rule of law, there's the notion that justice is blind. Well, justice is also kind of deaf and doesn't hear the crowd shouting for one outcome or another. And you've got to kind of live that. And the more you drift from it, the more you're going to drift from it, because you create all sorts of edge cases here. Now, I'm not naive, and prosecutors make decisions to prosecute not all of the time based on
Mass
the
hallucination,
palatability of it,
baby.
the consequences of it. You can take a pure utilitarian view of it and say, what if by doing this we create so much more ill in society? What if by prosecuting Trump we start a civil war, right? Just to use the most extreme example possible. And there's always a place for judgment, as there is in policing, as there is in so many other things in life. But the more you defer to judgment and away from the rule of law, I think the shakier you are long term, because there's also utilitarian value to rule of law in the long term, and saying, don't actually care.
There's so
Don't
many
actually
utils to
care,
be
because
accessed
you
here.
can't be mad at me, crowd, if I don't react to the crowd one way or the other, for the cheers or the jeers. But America's in a very dicey place right now. 6 in 10 Americans think he should be charged. That doesn't surprise me, because it was something.
Kind of
It's
surprised me.
58% when you get into it, and it was 54% in the poll they did previous. I think maybe 52. Either
Yeah.
way, it was a majority then. But that's not how this works, and that doesn't tell us anything about what the reaction will be from the other 40%, who are a big part of America.
Carter, your take on this in terms of Corey's analysis here, that running scenarios
I guess,
based
yeah,
on
I guess that
popularity,
actually doesn't
perhaps
surprise
not
me,
the
because
right
like
idea.
everyone in
Your
the
take.
major cities thinks it.
It's totally not the right idea.
Then
You don't poll to determine. I mean, you do a poll when someone's guilty or not guilty by asking the jury, and it needs to be unanimous. And those people pay attention and they study the evidence. One of the things that really bothers me about the United States is they think they're the only democracy in the world, and they're the only ones who've ever gone through this. And that's just simply not true.
true.
There are many democracies in the world. Many democracies have, in fact, prosecuted former leaders. They have gone through, a judge and jury situation. Some of them have been convicted. Some of them have been acquitted. The democracy in general continues forward. Where the democracy tends not to continue forward is when the rule of law is subverted. Now, we're used to the rule of law being subverted by the victor, right? The rule of law is subverted by, Trump ignoring things or pardoning his cronies, or allowing
Yeah.
the January 6th coup attempt to occur. All of that is interesting, right? But it's not. It's not this situation. This is a situation where there's an independent judiciary who has been set up to deal with this situation. The framers of the Constitution, the ones that the Republicans hold in such high regard with the Second Amendment, but only that amendment, they actually put together a Constitution that they felt would, in fact, be able to sustain this type of challenge. That's why they built them as three separate branches of government. It needs to go through that. Right now, the greater threat, in my mind, is that they choose not to prosecute, and that side feels emboldened to take more action. This shouldn't be taken a look at through a microscope and just say, okay, what is this about Trump?
Yeah.
Trump is part of this. Trump is a big part of this,
Okay,
but it's
now I feel
also
better about his
the
moveset.
Texas GOP who've decided that
Now I feel like I get to
basically
breathe a little.
secession should be back on the agenda. They want to take the Voters' Rights Act off the table. They want to, really put the United States of America back into a box it hasn't been in forever. That, to me, is the problem that we're facing. And if you choose not to prosecute Trump because you're afraid that you're going to lose the union, you've already lost the union, right? It's already gone. All that's left is it's just hanging on by a thread, awaiting a madman to be reelected in 2024 who will ultimately destroy the country.
Corey?
Yeah, well, there's a lot that Stephen said there, and I think I agree with almost all of it, if not all of it. America's in a really bad place right now. To state the most fucking obvious thing ever. They're so deep in meta-analysis, they have absolutely lost the goddamn plot. They're arguing about things that don't matter at all. Everybody is.
True.
The right, the left. They are arguing about things that do matter a lot too, don't get me wrong, but like the entire cacophony is no longer functioning in any way remotely resembling like an operating state. I saw this analysis the other day, and it's just one columnist's opinion on one thing, so I don't want to like blow it up to be the position of the United States, but it was Joe Biden's, Merrick Garland, as AG, should not be looking at prosecuting Donald Trump because that will show weakness, right? And you wouldn't want to show weakness there. And that's, can I count the ways that that's insane?
Yeah,
It's probably about 3, but America is in a weak place, and it is important that they show that the rule of law matters here. The fact that they're just, they're crossing every single one of these norms. You have candidates putting out videos about going rhino hunting, Republican in name only, and going door to door. Like every norm is gone here. Every norm is gone.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen the video, I mean, I don't even want to.
Don't see the video.
So,
Corey, can I ask? And I don't mean to like. Maybe I do. I'm going to ask it this way: is the committee at all to blame for leaning heavily into the politics of it, the theatrics, the production? Is it any surprise we've gotten to the point that a poll is kind of now put out there to say, like, how well is this committee doing? Is it fair? Should we prosecute? Have we kind of just leaned so much into the political part of this process that this shouldn't surprise anyone?
2 different questions, as you said yourself, Zane. How well is the committee doing is totally fair ball. That's something we've been talking about since there's been committees. Has the committee made a compelling case? What the committee is doing is not the same necessarily as what prosecutors will be doing with Donald Trump and whether they're going to take this evidence and move forward.
Next fight is Faulkner.
I don't think that it's wrong to ask, has the committee put together a compelling case? Have they put the witnesses through their questioning in an appropriate fashion? That's kind of the system working. What bothers me is this notion of
Pidgeotto, Kenai,
all right, that's all good. Now, how would you want to direct the independent judiciary to act if you had the ability to do that? That feels a little bit different.
Kenai, no item.
I don't blame the committee. The committee is trying to create the public view that Donald Trump did exactly what he did, frankly, and it sounds like 60% of Americans are there. So the problem is that's got to be 80, 90%, or else, to Stephen's point, it's a minority here that is pushing around the majority. Lest we forget, Donald Trump lost the election, right? And 60% believe he should be charged. Doesn't mean his odds of winning are that low because of so many other factors out there, including states basically openly saying that they would throw an election to Donald Trump in the future, irrespective of results, basically.
Yeah, I mean, we're teetering on the edge, anyways. Like, I think that the only way back for the United States, frankly, is to prosecute Trump, is to show his followers that the rule of law still exists. Now, will some followers take it too far? Absolutely. There will be a group of people who say they are prosecuting Trump because he is saying the right thing, and this is someone coming after. Of course, that's going to be part of the situation, but there might be another set of the population that sees it unfolds and sees the evidence that's been presented by the January 6th committee through the trial, through the discussion. And, he could be acquitted. Of course he could be acquitted, but he also could be found guilty, both of which would be very dangerous. But not prosecuting him is the ultimate danger, because you're now in a place where the rule of law no longer matters. Some people can get away with breaking the law and other people can't. And that's it's death to a democracy, Zane. Just death to it. What the fuck was that? Jesus Christ, Corey.
It was getting a little heavy. I'm saying.
We're going to leave that segment there, moving on to our final segment. Carter, we do this for you. Everything here is for you. Of course.
Are we at the end already?
Of course it is. Stephen Carter, overrated, underrated. I mentioned this earlier, but Scotiabank and few economists at Scotiabank are using their institutional voice to ultimately say Justin Trudeau is shirking Canada's inflation fight. Is that overrated or underrated in your mind in terms of that broadside, that sharp elbow against the Prime Minister and his government?
Well, it wasn't like the Prime Minister wasn't being blamed for it anyways. I mean, it's totally overrated. the inflation is what he's being blamed for. The price of gasoline is high. That's what he's being hit with, and that's what he's going to continue. My food costs more. My gas costs more. Why isn't Justin Trudeau doing something?
Corey, overrated or underrated? Scotiabank using an institutional voice to give a sharp elbow to the PM.
Politically overrated, but from a policy point of view, kind of has a point, don't you think? I mean, inflation is. We've talked about this in different contexts, where if the government really goes in trying to give people money to stop the fact that money is not flowing as freely from
Did we get our badge, by the way?
kind of defeats the whole purpose, and then you just get yourself in a really bad situation here. So
No, we didn't. I'm literally
not
schizophrenic.
wrong.
We didn't
not
get
likely
the
to
badge
happen.
at all.
Corey, I'm going to stick with you for our next one, and it's also about Trudeau. We've been talking about this, if I can call it, the funk that the Liberals are in. Is that funk, Corey, in your mind, overrated or underrated right now?
I could give either answer. I think at this
give me the
very
justification for both. I'm actually more curious than you showing your work than anything else.
So for overrated, a couple of reasons we've talked about. One is it is the end of session. Funk is the natural state at the end of session. The idea there's going to be a summer of malaise seems a bit ridiculous to me, because the Liberals are not the game during the summer. They're going to be talking about the Conservative Party leadership race, and we're going to see how that's going to unfold. That's where the eyes are, so I don't really see that there's a even normal amount of risk. It seems like a lowered amount of risk for the Liberals going throughout their day-to-day work there, or day-to-day work. But when you think about underrated, in some ways, I think the Liberals are in denial of the fact that there is actually a third-term malaise setting in. They can rightly point to an ambitious policy agenda that they've set over the past couple of years. We've talked about how they're probably one of the most transformative governments of our time. But that doesn't sort of change the feeling of drift that we've got right now on a day-to-day operational level, or when we start looking towards the horizon as to, okay, Liberals, but what next? And I think that because of that partisan back and forth, they see it just as partisan back and forth. And they're not seeing the legitimate criticism there that governments get old, governments get tired.
Carter, the Liberal funk, overrated or underrated?
I think it's overrated if they choose to address it and be aware of it. It's underrated if they allow it to fester. So if they're aware of it, then don't worry too much. Take action. Make sure you're coming back in the fall with a strong agenda, good throne speech, or whatever you need to do, or carry on the turn. Whatever you're choosing to do, but make it strong. But if you don't see it, if you don't see that it's happening, or you think that it's just normal, you're probably in a lot of trouble.
Carter, I'm going to stick with you for our next question here.
Yep.
Yes or no, Carter, Michelle Rempel-Gardner entering the UCP leadership race is a game changer. You said that others have said so. Do you agree that her candidacy would be a game changer, yes or no?
No.
Corey, yes or no? Do you think her candidacy would be a game changer?
No to the game changer. Wow, man.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that it's because she will all of a sudden. I think Carter made the compelling case. She'll be everybody's second choice. She was outside of this warfare. One of the things
we got so many more words. I had like one word, yes or no, and then he get like an answer.
That's true. He did get on
rules here, man. Come on, just you renew. Jesus, keep going, Corey. You were doing so well before Carter said more words. He was only allowed one. Go ahead, Corey.
Everybody else who was in the race has associated in some way, shape, or form with a side in the Jason Kenney versus not Jason Kenney fight. And by not even having a membership, apparently,
looks like people not turning up tonight.
Rempel-Gardner has managed to find her way out of that box.
I like that explanation, Corey. For our final question, sticking with Michelle Rempel-Gardner. This time next week, Corey. This time next week, is she in or is she out of the UCP leadership race?
Well, in for sure. I would say by this time Friday she's in.
Ooh, Corey's actually taking a prediction question, giving a straight answer, and actually limiting the terms of the question. Carter,
being a Carter there, now
Carter,
I feel like I need to hedge and take the traditional Corey position.
Carter, this time next week, what is Michelle Rempel-Gardner? Is she in or out?
I'm gonna one up Corey. We're gonna be covering her announcement live when we do Thursday night's podcast for the subscribers only Patreon version of the strategist. If you missed, by the way, this last strategist episode, Corey and I really dug deep on a number of issues. And I think that we've been proven to be perfectly correct on everything. Isn't that right, Corey?
No, I would agree with that. And if you're not paying $6 a month, you'll never know. So.
You'll never know. But, the $6 has been pretty well spent for those of you who are spending the $6.
Good. Way to tell people how to feel, Carter. I like that. We're going to leave it there. That's a wrap of episode 998 of The Strategist. My name is Zane Velji. With me, as always, Stephen Carter, Corey Hogan, and we will see you next time.
Alright, that's pretty fucking boring. Michelle Rimble Garner probably does like what probably is gonna do what Jean Jaurès will do, and will be like a lot of people's second choice and then end up winning. And in Alberta, if you win the Conservative leadership race, you're basically just premier at that point, because no one else has any chance of winning. Okay. What did I say? There's a Power and Politics episode? Oh, no. I wanted to watch the Matthew Green thing. What was it? He was on Power Play. Okay, let's pull it up. Do you think it's here? Shows and podcasts. It might be. Wait. Is this Power Play? I'm schizo posting myself, Kaya. What do you mean? You always have to talk to yourself. That's how you stay sane while doing this challenge. While mindlessly killing metapods. I developed a new strategy though. The new tech is Cyndaquil. Wait, okay, I'm gonna watch the thing now. Power Play. CTV, here we go. Oh wait, did he say it was gonna be airing on Friday? Let me check his Twitter. It's 12 minutes. Okay, this is like a 12-minute clip. Alright, fuck it, let's watch this. By watch this, I mean listen to it, because fuck how I'm watching this shit. Alright, let's see what our boy Matthew Green has to say. What he's up to these days.
I'm speaking to you now about the content of those conversations.
I'm asking you if you...
Okay, so this is Green talking to Finance Minister Christian Freeland, I think.
Do you have notes? Do you have notes?
I'm speaking to you now about the content of those conversations.
I'm asking you if you took notes.
It appears as if you refer to that binder a lot. Would it, in its entirety, can you present it to the committee?
These notes are for my own personal use.
And you don't take notes as a former police officer of decades? You don't take detailed notes on your meetings?
I've always been very careful in carrying any notes or paper with respect to matters of significant confidence.
That was a wild scene last night. A lot of questions for Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair, two ministers who were very critical members of the government when they invoked the Controversial Emergencies Act, but they didn't give a lot of answers last night at the committee. That was the Emergency Preparedness Minister testified to the Joint Committee alongside Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, saying, you know, we didn't even take notes on some key briefings as to why we need it, so we can't show you any notes. Look, the committee is studying the first ever use of the Emergencies Act, and they're trying to get some answers.
This is such a boring.
So far, the government's saying,
no
look, we do not have any notes on it. And what about the minister who's been?
Yeah, like I wonder why people like find politics super boring. Like what a boring news story. Did the Emergency Act affect anyone's life really? Like was anyone's like I don't know. I guess I say this, but there's always like the trucker people that get Superman and stuff. So like it's just such a snooze fest being like, oh, the Emergencies Act, soy. They used it, and maybe they shouldn't have, even though like they didn't do anything bad with it. Like if they were using the Emergencies Act and then like doing stuff they shouldn't have, that would have been pretty bad. But it seems like it was used pretty responsibly.
In the front of this, Marco Mendicino, as we showed you last night, he has repeatedly said the government acted on the advice of police, but the police say we never gave them the advice. And last night, Bill Blair said, you know what? They never even asked for it. It's the government's call. Now Marco Mendicino is facing calls by the opposition to resign. Our special guest on the program today was on the committee last night, and he joins us today on our press gallery alongside reporters Stephanie Levitz with the Toronto Star Ottawa Bureau and Zian Lum is a reporter with Politico. And again, our special guest is the ethics critic for the NDP, Matthew Green, who we just featured there. Great to have all of you here. Mr. Green, I want to start with you because there's calls for Marco Mendicino to resign because allegedly, according to the opposition, the Conservatives, he's misled Parliament. Do you believe that you who voted for the Emergencies Act were misled by Minister Mendicino or others who have said we've acted on the advice of police and police told us to invoke the act and so we did? Do you believe that you've been misled or Parliament's been misled?
No, I mean, at this point, they're splitting hairs. It feels like a diversion from what I think is the Conservative Party's culpability in this. But it should be noted that the minister, and in fact, all ministers who've been present at committee, have refused to be forthcoming with very basic information. And that is a significant and serious cause for alarm.
Okay, but do you feel then that the NDP were led down the path? Like here you are, you voted for the Emergencies Act, you thought it met the threshold, and have you got any evidence from Minister Mendicino, Minister Blair, Minister Freeland? Have they given you any transparent information that you can confidently tell Canadians, yes,
he's not going to give an answer here. I bet my entire nutsack he doesn't.
I mean, we confirmed the Emergencies Act after it was invoked, having witnessed and experienced, quite frankly, what thousands of people in Ottawa had experienced and based on information that was made publicly available. I will say, though, that no, this government has not, I think, adequately pleaded its case to the Canadian public, regardless of what side of the issue you're on, with just the basic information. We had a finance minister
gave an
who
answer.
couldn't quote any specific economic impacts when even the city of Ottawa came forward with some
false
numbers.
information.
It's quite concerning, quite frankly, given the seriousness of this, the historic nature of it, the special composition of the committee.
Spreading disinformation.
That time and time again, witness after witness, they just refuse to provide even basic information.
Let me bring you Stephanie Levitz. So now we've got, and we showed this last night in the program, we showed it again, Marco Mendicino on multiple occasions, February 21st and then on in May, saying they acted on the advice of the police, and no police chief, RCMP, the Ottawa police have saying we never asked it. And then Bill Blair said, you know, actually nobody
I have a
asked for it.
DPS account now?
What do you make of the calls for the resignation? And if, is this a misunderstanding or a
There's a, what's it called? For Overwatch, oh no, he's gone. Never mind, he's gone. That's okay. Someone new will be in. Who's Yogi? Wait, it's like some random... Oh, it's probably a bot. It's definitely just a bot. Sorry. Peachel. There you go. Okay, back to... Why are you up? Wait, why are you up? Back to power play, sorry.
misleading?
has to be fundamentally, where's the accountability and where does that buck stop? I mean, if the New Democrats, with apologies here to Mr. Green, if the New Democrats are going to prop up the Liberal government ongoing while at the same time argue that no, the government has not met the threshold for invoking this historic piece of legislation,
yeah, but
then do you
it's
pull
on
down
the
the government
deal.
over it? I mean, at what point did Canadians rise up and say, hey, the government lied to us? And when it came to this historic use of this legislation,
It's not on the deal, though.
Ought not there be some accountability for this if the government cannot convincingly make the case that it needed to use it? It's a matter of precedence what they've done. And so if the Liberals can't
They can
justify
fire the
it
one
through
guy if they
facts,
want.
data, science, whatever they'd like to use to justify it, then what's to stop another government from doing it for some other reason? I think it's a very serious matter of parliamentary accountability that the Liberals put all of their cards on the table here and explain to Canadians specifically why they needed this piece of legislation.
Yeah, Gilles, what is your view of this? Minister Mendocino explicitly had said they're acting on the advice of police. Police said, we didn't give them advice. And now we're hearing, well, they just wanted powers. They're not supposed to invoke it, so we do that job. Is this misleading or misunderstanding, quote, splitting hairs, as Mr. Green says?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding, but just the problem is we haven't seen the pudding yet. And the committee tried to find pieces of it yesterday. But I want to, pick up on the accountability piece that Steph kind of picked up on and kind of return to that clip that you started the segment with. I skipped dinner time to watch this committee, and in retrospect, I should have eaten my dinner because the Deputy Prime Minister didn't tell me anything new per se. It was basically a masterclass in self-preservation. Freeland was unwilling to supply finance documents when asked by MP
Like, I don't know what you
and
expect
others on
from
the
these
committee.
people.
And everything she said was largely
they're
a
not going to be
pastiche of
forthcoming.
what has been already said in previous statements and references to materials already on the public record.
Okay, one more level.
I get the reflex that maybe you don't want to make news, but it's a choice to provide testimony to add value to an investigative process versus coming off as making a mockery of it or a potential mockery of it. In the second block, you had the clip of Bill Blair. It was his turn in the hot seat, and he was candid and kind of forthcoming in some of the answers that he provided to committee. But it was also very incredible to witness the public safety minister's confidence and non-apologetic tone when he said, I don't take notes. That was a really revealing moment.
That's kind of a chat
There's an
moment.
entire culture and whole workflows on the Hill that are designed to kind of minimize paper trails. And that pre-existed the invocation of the Emergency Act, and that pre-existed the pandemic too. So my takeaway from the committee was that Cabinet's paper trail allergy continues to influence present-day operations, including exceptional circumstances where decision makers are mulling the invocation of unprecedented emergency measures, and that was both
Is she
incredible and
really
disappointing
breathing
to
like
witness,
okay, whatever.
because
This
those
seems cringe.
reflexive of systemic and intentional exercises
I don't know about
that
this lady.
undermine
She seems a
accountability.
little sus.
So, Mr. Green, just do you believe this? We don't have any notes. Is this going to undermine credibility, which would raise the question that you don't believe
possible.
them? But
I don't know. I
raise
just
the
don't
question,
believe
how are
them.
you going to get a credibility, accountability from a government
It's definitely possible.
that you
I
support?
can see them not taking notes.
Well, listen, the confidence and supply agreement is something else. What we're talking about right now is the Emergency Act Review Committee. I think anybody who's watching it knows that I'm doing a good job holding this government to account. We have unlimited parliamentary powers to send for documents, people, and evidence. That is established in jurisprudence. We have legal opinion to that fact. We will be using every single tool that we have available to ensure that this government provides with candor and clarity the information that our committee was constructed to
But you don't believe it.
review.
I just want to be clear. When you say there's no notes, are you saying that they're
No,
lying, that
I
they
don't
actually
believe it.
have
I
notes, or
don't
that the
believe it.
staff?
No, it's unbelievable,
so
Evan. It's unbelievable. And when I hear the minister say he himself personally didn't take notes, that's fine. But I can't believe that in that room they didn't have senior staffers taking notes. And so what we need to do is get a hold of the notes. Clearly, the ministers who were present had a binder full.
Okay, so Green is saying there's like a 0% chance notes don't exist. Like, notes exist. It's just he didn't take them personally. Which I guess, like, thinking about it makes a lot of sense. Like, that's a very good way to skate around that question. Like, if someone asks for notes, be like, I didn't take any personally. but like the government said he did. That's a good theory. I really like that. It's kind of smart.
Full of notes. So let's start there. Let's get to the information and let's find out exactly what they knew, when they knew it, and what they did about it.
Steph, I mean, look, Parliament's going to rise, I don't know, this week, next week, I don't know, but how big a political problem is this now? You've got Mr. Mendocino, and the Conservatives called.
I think it's going to, like, summer's going to hit, people are going to feel a bit over everything.
How serious
Actually,
is this right now politically, and how does it cut politically?
Well, I mean, you know, to pick up on, again, a point that Mr. Green raised before about the Conservatives sort of using this as a political cover for their original support of the convoy, right? And some of them really speaking up in favor of the messaging coming from the Freedom Convoy, dismissing the anti-government sentiment, the anti-establishment sentiment that was there as nothing more than a few bad apples. You know, this is easy for them to just, sometimes in politics, it's a pretty cheap call to say so-and-so must resign, right? It's pretty easy and it grabs a lot of headlines. Can the Conservatives continue to politically weaponize this throughout the summer? I mean, they're heading into, you know, the crunch of
their leadership race.
And that's going to occupy certainly the Conservative rank and file. We also, of course, have the, excuse me, the more broader public inquiry into all of this, or the public commission that is going to spool up its work. So it's not like the story's going away, even though the Commons is going to break for the summer. And again,
dude,
I
this
mean,
Cyndaquil is so
I think,
good.
in the minds of many Canadians. There's those of us who live in Ottawa witness this firsthand.
I want this run to win.
May have had a visceral response to what was happening, calls for action, wanting something to be done. That's one piece of it. But the second piece of it, again, is the government choosing to invoke for the first time these historic and unprecedented measures to seize people's bank accounts, to make tow truck drivers move in, do all of these things. And it has to be considered more broadly than that. Was it an overreach of government power? And I hope that Canadians are thoughtful about that question, even if they sort of dismiss the idea, oh, it was just a bunch of protests in Ottawa that needed to get cleared.
Okay, I got to leave it there for our special guest. Mr. Green, first of all, I really appreciate Matthew Green joining us as our special guest on the panel.
That's what I call a cool story, bro. Okay.
This is a CBC podcast.
It's Power and Politics time.
From the halls of Parliament Hill to your dining room table, the cost of living crisis in this country is being felt by Canadians.
Things are up like $2 or $3. I know something I bought for $12 all the time, $14.99.
All sorts of brands and stores, everything's going up.
Everything you buy, you have to watch it now.
I would love to see things come down. The price of food is shocking.
You look at the food, you look at the price, and you're like, maybe tomorrow.
New data from StatsCan shows inflation was 7.7% in May. That's the highest it's been in almost four decades. Gas prices alone are up 48% from a year ago. Food, almost 10%. Furniture, 15.8%. The pressure is on politicians. Canadians are asking for help.
We will take real and tangible steps to get inflation under control and to make life more affordable for Canadians.
We have been calling for months for this government to start addressing gas prices.
So we've got a real serious trouble on our hands, and people need help.
And that is where we start tonight on this special edition of Power and Politics. Hi there, I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa this evening. We're talking about the cost of living crisis in this country and what politicians can do about it, and we're putting your questions to them. With us now, Peter Fragiskatos is Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue, and Dan Albus is the Conservative finance critic. Hi to both of you. Thanks for being here. The leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, is coming up next. He's listening in to this conversation. Mr. Fragiskatos, I'll start with you, and I'm going to start with a question from a viewer. His name is Joaquin. Have a listen.
Hello, my name is Joaquin Mota from Morden, Manitoba, and my question is, when are you going to reduce the taxes on gasoline and diesel? Thank you.
Mr. Fragiskatos.
Okay, I'm pausing. Also, okay, fine. That guy's a ploy, but I don't care. Getting food.
When will your government do that?
Well, thank you to you, Vashti, for having us on, and for Joaquim for the question. There's a range of measures that democracies around the world are considering. As you saw last week, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister announced a suite of measures that will have a direct impact on making life more affordable for Canadians. As far as the gas tax question is concerned, it's not to be ruled out. The question is, will it have a impact? Will it have a meaningful impact, a direct impact in the way that some, including conservative politicians, say that it will? It's not clear that it would. It's such a volatile environment right now, right? We have, traditionally gas prices are always volatile. But take the current context internationally. You have Ukraine, which is the war continues to unfold there. That's going to continue to have an impact on energy prices. There's other factors that are impacting that as well. And so we're monitoring this, but the suite of measures that were announced last week, which will become available very shortly, next month, the OAS for seniors age 75 and older is going up.
Yeah,
CCB is indexed to inflation.
I just want to stop you there for a moment, because we do have a number of questions I want to get to, and I want to follow up on your answer there first before I get a viewer to ask their question to Mr. Albus. First of all, when you say announced a suite of measures, you re-announced them. They were already in the budget that came out months before that announcement last week. Second of all, when it comes to the consideration of whether or not some sort of suspension of tax on gas would be effective, I would point out that what's proposed by the Biden administration in the U.S. today, if it goes through, it would make Canada the only remaining country in the G7 not to have cut gas taxes in response to, or some sort of subsidy in response to what's happening with the price of fuel during this current crisis. And third, when you talk about effectiveness, look to Alberta, for example, which has offered a rebate on the provincial tax portion, and they actually just extended it today. They just announced an extension. It has, according to the economist at the University of Calgary, I believe, Trevor Tombe, actually reduced the price of gas there. It has been effective. So at what point will you consider? What's the metric? What's the bar?
Well, again, Bashi, on the measures announced last week, I say announced because the budget was put forward a few months ago, yes, but there's an implementation act that needs to be put forward before measures are enacted. So I don't mean to get into process, but that is an important point to emphasize.
But they're not new. Let's be blunt with our viewers. I don't want to mislead them and them to think that what you're saying is new stuff is coming your way. The stuff that's indexed to inflation was already made clear. And I'm not saying it's not helpful. I'm just saying it was made clear in the budget.
They weren't measures that were being felt and having an impact last week. They will very soon. For example, in July, as I talked about the OAS already, you have the climate action incentive that is going to kick in. You have the Canada Child Benefit that is indexed to inflation. Childcare, the costs for that will come down significantly, 50% by the end of the year. Dental care, we are moving ahead on that for low-income families. So these are meaningful things. On the question of gas, I'm not going to avoid that question. It is something that democracies are looking at. I don't think that in Canada the question has been ruled out. But what I would say is that will it have the impact that many observers are saying that it would have in the Conservative Party, for example? This is the point they continue to bring up. I just don't see it. We have a very volatile international market that is impacting energy prices. We lead with empathy on this question of affordability. We want to impact people directly and make sure that they have an improved situation. We understand food prices are higher, gas prices are higher. There's a number of things that need to be looked at, but cost of living as a whole needs to be looked at, and that's why the suite of measures announced last week are genuinely meaningful.
Okay, we will continue on that track in a second, but Mr. Albus, I want to put a viewer question to you. This is Khalil's question.
My name is Khalil. I'm from Toronto, and my question is, what immediate concrete actions can you take to reduce the price of food on the shelves? Thank you.
So, Mr. Albus, the propositions your party has put forth so far are mostly geared towards reducing the price at the pump. What would your party propose to address the cost of food?
So we actually had a motion last week that the Liberals and the New Democrats voted down, and in it, it actually said, let's reduce tariffs on things that we need, for example, for various foodstuffs, diapers, et cetera, that Canadians need. That's a way, again, the government of Canada collects those tariffs. It doesn't go to other countries, and especially on fertilizer. So the government has been signaling new changes on tariffs when it comes to fertilizer, as well as restrictions on what they can use. So if farmers can't grow food with fertilizers, they can't grow food at all or very well. Let's also remind ourselves that gasoline is a key driver of inflation, whether it be at the grocery store or whatnot. You need to have the transportation costs. And again, to actually put food on people's tables, you need farmers that have industrial grade equipment to do that. So I disagree with the parliamentary secretary. One of the fastest ways we can do to lower inflation, and you said it yourself, Vashi, we have 2 months of data of when the Alberta government lowered gas taxes. It actually lowered inflation compared to the rest of Canada. So Alberta is not only protecting their consumers, but they're actually protecting their economy and cooling down inflation. Now, what President Biden has suggested is that not only have they opened up their strategic reserves, but they're also saying that we are proposing a 3-month holiday on gas taxes, and he's suggesting that states do otherwise. Look, if every province took action, even a little bit, along with the federal government, we would actually see costs at the grocery store, costs at the pumps go down, as, again, gas is one of the key inflators of inflation. So we want the government to start focusing on measures that will help people today. They keep promising more new spending and not realizing their key role in inflation. Look, Chrystia Freeland made a choice, and she was criticized by the parliamentary budget officer for putting $100 billion of new stimulus spending that had nothing to do with COVID. Now, it was a choice. She's been injecting more money into the economy, and that has been raising the prices that Canadians are seeing. That is how
ultimately, ultimately, is it fiscally responsible of your party to, for example, propose this holiday on taxes, which ultimately would decrease the revenues used by the government that goes towards this spending, right? You end up with a bigger deficit through what you are proposing. How is that fiscally responsible?
Well, so it's not spending. It's actually letting people keep their money. And again,
it's forfeiting revenue to the government.
In a usual year, Vashi, they collect about $5 billion off of GST at the pump between diesel and between gasoline. Last year, they brought in $14 billion. So look, they are bringing in this windfall profits, and they're putting it towards all sorts of spending that is actually driving up inflation. What we saw, Vashi, is that when people in Alberta reduced the gas price, that was immediately passed on.
But that didn't happen in Germany. It did happen in Alberta.
Well, in Germany,
it didn't happen in Germany.
But in Germany, they're also in a much different situation. They don't have a strategic oil reserve. They're completely dependent on oil and gas, but they still have put $16 billion into a gas plan so that they can...
Togepi is literally just to bring out Ghastly. So what do you think about Ghastly's nickname? It's like a big power hitter. It's pretty weak though. What should we go Togepi's name? I could just name it Bait, but like, does that mean I name it Destiny? No, there's better names. I'll name him Tucker, because he's like Bait. It's just a pundit, he's not an actual politician. Who'd be our version of Tucker Carlson? Probably Peterson? There you go. This is Peterson.
both lower inflation and protect their consumers, Vashi. So I'm not saying this is costless. That's why we haven't said make it a permanent tax cut. We've said make it a temporary one. We actually haven't put a timeline to it because we want to be able to adjust with international events. But you know what, Vashi? This is the problem. In the United States, they have strategic oil reserves. Well, we have reserves too, but this government has actually made it so that the private sector doesn't want to produce more oil and gas because they don't see a future.
There's 300,000 extra barrels of oil being produced a day right now. But I take I know what you're saying. I just know that it'll open up a whole other debate, and unfortunately, I don't have enough time for one.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But again, conservatives want to see action today, and this is a responsible way to do it.
I have to leave it there. Peter Fragascatos and Dan Albas, thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate your time tonight. Now let's turn for the NDP perspective to Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democratic Party. Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to have you here in studio.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. I want to start off with a question from a viewer. This one comes from Janet. Let's play it.
Hi, my name is Janet Dadato from Toronto. My question is, do you think high interest rates will reduce the cost of living?
So this is a question I think on a lot of Canadians' minds as they're faced with higher prices. Now their mortgage is getting more.
That's just a fact.
I think this is a really serious concern that a lot of Canadians have because it's not going to bring down the cost of living. In fact, increasing interest rates are going to make the immediate short-term pain even harder. Mortgage payments are going to go up. Car payments are going to go up. And this is why we've been saying that the traditional response to inflation has always been to increase interest rates. And it'll lessen demand, certainly, but it's going to increase the pain. And so we said it can't be the only response. And right now that seems to be one of the major responses. And we're saying what we need to do to lessen the brunt of the impact of increased interest rates, in addition to the cost of living already being so high, is to send money directly to people, but to redistribute money in the system that's already there. We've relied on some economists that have suggested not injecting new money, but using the windfall of the increased revenue from the inflation that the government's currently enjoying, as well as corporations who have increased their profits and contributed 1/4 to the current inflation just because they increased their profits beyond the increased costs. So if we tax those corporations and we redistributed that money back into people's pockets directly with about $1,000 as we're proposing, that'll help people now.
I mean, as two things in that I have a follow-up questions on. Mm-hmm. The first is, as you know, corporate profits go up, there is more corporate income tax that comes into federal coffers. The second is, how do you know that corporate profits are responsible for 1/4 of inflation? Because I think that's assuming a lot about the sort of makeup of those profits.
Well, we looked at a number of economists who've reported that, and we looked at the current profit margin of corporations across the country. And we've seen they're making record profits in a variety of sectors.
Come on,
and their profits are far beyond an increase simply in cost, because there's a legitimate increase in cost based on the cost of gas going up, but they're making record profits. We looked at corporate grocery stores, big box retail. We're looking at the overall corporate sector in Canada, and profits have gone up significantly. And economists have pointed directly to this corporate greed as contributing 1/4 to the current inflation. And so we're saying that is something we need to tax the excess profits on. We need to use the GST windfall and redistribute that money back to Canadians who need it, to working families, to people that are feeling the brunt of this impact.
I think you're talking about the David McDonald study for the CCPA, and I guess my question on that is around whether or not, I mean, there's a lot of speculation. There's nothing that demonstrates exactly the source of those profits, but at the same, so I think there is a discussion to have about the sort of factual nature of that. But at the same time, I will tell you, we got so many questions from people who are asking about corporate profits, and in particular, if the government will consider extra taxes on them, or if something should happen. Are you, like, when you talk about redistribution, do you mean extra taxes and then moving that money, or just take the extra money that's already come in and move it towards people?
No, we mean extra taxes, just like we did.
Is that necessary, I guess, though? Just because there's already, as I think Dan Albas was pointing out, GST revenue has increased by quite a bit. Absolutely.
So for the GST tax credit, which we're proposing, we increase that by double. We can use the GST windfall as inflation has meant that GST revenues have gone up. But for the corporations that are making record profits, we're talking about oil and gas companies like Imperial Oil, who've seen a 30-year high profit. We're talking about corporate grocery stores that are making huge profits. We're proposing to do what the Liberals have said that they'll do for banks, which we push them to continue to follow through on, above $1 billion profits, an additional 15% tax in the short term to address the fact that these companies are making huge windfalls, massive profits, and people are struggling as a way to redistribute some of that money in the system to people who need it, to working families, to families that are right now feeling the squeeze of the inflation.
I'm going to ask you a question that we also got from a lot of viewers that I feel like you get a lot of the time, and so you're probably sick of it, but I'll try to ask it in a different way. You know, everyone sort of says, well, then why did you make this deal that props the Liberals up, that allows them to put forth these policies or not consider policies that you think are worthy? There was inflation. It wasn't at this level, but there was inflation when that arrangement was negotiated. Are there moments in time right now where you're kind of like banging the drum saying, hey, this is some obvious stuff you could be doing to help people who are really, really hurting, where you think, you know, I could have got more, I should have got more?
Well, at the time, what we achieved was probably the biggest expansion of our national healthcare system in a generation with the dental care plan, to expand also a $500 top-up to families that receive the Canadian housing benefit. That's 1 million families that will receive $500 extra this year alone. So national dental care and a $500 top-up for Canadians who need help with their rent was very meaningful at the time. But I acknowledge that at the time when we negotiated this deal, there were some early signs of cost of living going up, but it wasn't as bad as it is right now. And now, looking at the severity of what we're going through, we're calling for more. Our agreement gives us a floor, not a ceiling, a floor of what we've agreed to deliver our support in exchange for real help for Canadians. But there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I raised that directly with the Prime Minister when we had our follow-up call based on the agreement.
Was that recently?
That was recently, just a day ago. And so we spoke about that, and I said, given the new circumstances we're in, given the intensity of inflation, given the intensity of cost of living
part of the deal,
up, and Canadians reporting 1 in 4 that are going hungry, 1 in 4 that are saying they will not be able to afford their home. That's serious.
This can be level 6.
If inflation continues to rise. So we need to help people now. We've proposed a real clear plan to do that, giving families as much as $1,000.
They just haven't shown any public reception to that. Like, is there something different happening in your conversation? Do you think the federal government will actually implement anything that you're proposing?
Well, I think the federal government needs to. I think.
But are they? Like, are they showing? And I'm asking genuinely because I think Canadians watching, you know, feel like you exchanged your support for something, and they're not necessarily seeing the benefits of it. Yes, they'll get dental care. Yes, they might get that stipend for rent. But beyond that, what can you really tell them?
We can continue to push this government to do more. And we know that our support on helping pass bills is
a female queen. A female hard carry. So there's not a lot of, I guess I could just do Freeland. Christina Freeland. I feel like that's like the big stepper right now, if you will. Okay, back to
not something that they can take
Mr.
for granted
Singh's
if they're not going to deliver the help that Canadians need, and if they're not going to follow through on the commitments they've made to us. So first off, we want to see them follow through on what they promised to deliver, but we also know that Canadians need more help now. And if Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government refuse to give people the help they need now, when people are hurting, that is the fault of the Liberals. We're demanding.
Is that a line for you? And I know you guys hate that red line question, but I mean, I'm genuinely curious. Like, do you tell the Prime Minister, if you can't help people with this cost of living crisis, you don't have my support anymore?
Well, we have levers, and we're going to use those levers to make sure we get help to people. We've laid out what we want to see happen, and now the ball's in the Liberals' government's court. We've laid out clear plans that we would suggest that the government take right now to send money to people. The way we did in the past, the GST tax credit is a tool that works. It'll get money to people. We want to get up to $1,000 to people right now. We know that working families need that help. That's direct money in their pockets. It's not a tax cut that might help those who have a larger vehicle or who have more money, who drive more often. This is to help families that need help, that working families that need help will directly get compensation. And it'll redistribute money in the system, so it's not going to add to inflation. And that's what we're calling for.
Okay, Mr. Singh, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP. Tonight, we are tackling the cost of living crisis in this country. New data from StatsCan show prices in May were up 7.7% over last year. The Bank of Canada, as we were just discussing with Mr. Singh, saying is hiking rates to rein those numbers in. The bank's benchmark interest rate sits at 1.5%, up from 1% at the beginning of June. But the bank is signaling more hikes are on the way, with the next one coming in the middle of July. I spoke with the Bank of Canada's former governor, Stephen Poloz, and asked him what he reads into today's big inflation number.
But that's the main thing, is all this is a price increase. And if oil prices and energy costs stay roughly where they are today, then of course over the next 12 months, what we would get is a gradual unwinding of that effect in the inflation rate. And that's really important for people to bear in mind. I know we just report this one big number. The fact is, most of it is nothing we can control, and it will be transitory. There's the T word.
Okay, help us understand, because, and in layman's terms, because what we have seen is certainly a number of months ago, the assessment around inflation was that it was transitory. Since then, we've seen certain figures, for example, in the U.S. acknowledge that that assessment at that point in time was wrong. When you say it's transitory, do you mean, what exactly do you mean in layman's terms? And what can Canadians take from that about how high those prices will be 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road?
So an important distinction. The prices that we see today could be the same price, let's say, for gasoline 6 months or 12 months from now. That's possible. But if that is the case, the rate of inflation will steadily go down all by itself, just because the prices from 12 months ago are rising too. And so that's the kind of the arithmetic effect. And so, and that's the sense in which economists said from the beginning that this would be transitory, not that it would go away immediately, but that it would go away by itself in a mechanical way. Now, the longer that takes, oil prices, have been rising for more than a year now. And so it'll take more than a year for those things to dissipate in the calculation. What do we be left with? Well, the question is, how much do those higher oil prices and other energy costs infect the rest of the economy? And that is the part that is subject to control. And that is the part that the central banks will be responding to, not the energy costs themselves. It's a really important distinction.
This is a terrible
Do you think that early assessment, as I mentioned, as was acknowledged in the United States, was incorrect? Do you think, for example, that central banks overall, and I'm not asking you to opine specifically on this one, but overall got it wrong initially?
Initially, from what I said the same thing, so I'm not going to say I was wrong. I think it is still correct that the supply chain issues should have gone away faster. They're taking longer to correct because there have been more shutdowns subsequent to our return to normal.
Let me try and make it as digestible as possible for Canadians and ask you to come along with me. When you say that it was that it would, I guess I wonder, would it be wrong to have been more aggressive with interest rates earlier, given what we know now?
So if we look back and, if we, at the time, I'd say a year ago, we were worried about, Delta and then Omicron and another whole wave of, recessionary conditions in the economy. But of course, as it turned out, we were pretty resilient to those. So of course, if you've known how things would turn out, I think you might have done it differently. But of course, the fact is, we didn't know how it would turn out. And so it was right to be cautious. Throughout this, what was most important was to protect the downside in the economy and avoid a deflationary track, which would run the risk of creating the second Great Depression. We should all be pretty happy that that was averted. And if because of that success, we've ended up a little too much on the other side of this, that's still a really big success. And we're in a position now where we know a certain amount of inflation will prove transitory. Let's suppose it's 3.5%, the underlying inflation rate. That's how much inflation actually has been annualized since just before the pandemic, excluding energy. And if that's where we end up, that's a manageable thing. And it'll take maybe a year or two to get back to 2%. That's a manageable process. And none of it has to be that traumatic.
And if I could just for a second say, and I totally understand the way in which you're characterizing it, I think for Canadians, the word manageable or not so bad or a success are hard to rectify with the prices that they're paying or the struggles they're having right now with the cost of living. Do you anticipate an aggressive posture by the central bank? Do you anticipate that they will need to do successive large-sized rate hikes, or will that be something analyzed as they go?
I think it's an analyze as you go, a feel your way thing. There's a certain amount which is a given. We basically have to get back to what we consider to be neutral or normal. So no one should be surprised that that's occurring. Everybody who thought interest rates would stay at zero, that was just a dream. That would not go on. Once the emergency was passed, then we had to get back to normal. But there are key things that we don't know, Vashi, like how much will the economy slow down by itself just because of these higher energy costs and food costs that we're all paying? That takes money out of your pocket that's not available for the summer vacation or whatever else you were hoping to spend money on. So that's an effect that is even more widespread than rate hikes on the effect on the economy. We also don't know how the economy will react to higher interest rates. There's more debt. It may be more fragile. And of course, it's surprising to many.
Prediction is certainly difficult. It's become very, understandably, I think, to a certain degree, political. And I'm wondering, just as someone who has occupied that governor chair before, what you make of the calls, for example, to fire the Bank of Canada governor vis-a-vis everything that's happened with inflation. Those are very, I know it's politics, but it certainly is imbuing like a perception of the bank and of that position onto much of the public. And I wonder what you would say in response.
Well, you say it's political, it's pure politics. And that, of course, is to some extent, it's unfortunate that politics infects the monetary policy process at all. Central banks are designed to be separate from politics, and for very good reasons. Okay, and the odd thing is historically it's been the politicians that want to overexpand the economy, overheat the economy, and therefore run higher risk of having inflation. I'm gratified that right now the public perception is this inflation is a bad thing and we should fight it. And that's good because that's exactly right. But historically, that has not been the case. It's why central banks need that independence to be able to operate in an intelligent way, in a measured way, and not be moved around by political stresses or any other phenomena. And so I think it's unfortunate that the issue has gone so political. I expect that as we go through the second half of the year, I think oil prices probably have about peaked by now. So there's a very good chance that over the second half of this year, we'll see inflation ticking down a little bit most months. I think that's going to reassure people quite a lot. Plus, of course, the central banks are, moving into gear, moving rates higher, making it clear that they're on the job and taking care of this. I think people will be reassured by it. And then, of course, that should mean it becomes a lot less political.
Okay, we shall see. Thank you, Mr. Paulus. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Here now to help us parse through what you just heard, Peter Armstrong, the CBC's senior business correspondent. He's in Toronto. Peter, good to have you with us. Help us understand Mr. Paulus's comments on prices staying where they are, but inflation normalizing or going down.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I thought that whole interview was fascinating. And you go back through and listen again because he's such an interesting communicator. Listen, what I think he's talking about there is that, like, take the price of gasoline was up, what was it, like 48.5% year over year. So from this month last year to now, the price of gasoline has skyrocketed by nearly 50%. Let's say the price of gasoline just stays flat. It doesn't even start to drop, but it stays flat for the next 12 months, then it no longer shows up in inflation, right? What all CPI does is measure how much things are growing or shrinking. And if it flattens out, then, it stops showing up. And it's a really interesting point in as much as even if it flattens out and stays at these crazy levels that we're at right now that you're paying at the pumps, inflation, it won't show up on the inflation numbers, even though we're still paying $2.08 or whatever we're paying right now per liter at the pumps. And so, Francis Donald talks about this all the time, that CPI math isn't real life math. And you have to sort of parse through what inflation is really, what prices are doing and where they are. But all of these increases that we've seen over these last, whatever it is, year or so, are kind of baked in and permanent now until we start to see inflation actually drop, not just level off and continue to grow at a more manageable 2%.
And that's going to continue to hit consumers and hit households. And, one last point on that is just we're not seeing a huge drop off in prices yet. The 3-month trend is still really sharp. It's going straight up. So we're still seeing inflation actually accelerating here, even while the price of oil, which will affect the price of gas, is beginning to drop off a little bit.
What about the kind of politics around all this? And those were some interesting answers as well. And in particular, what's fueled the politics, this whole debate or discussion around whether the government, economists, and the central banks got inflation wrong, sort of didn't realize that it would be where it is right now, thought it would be a little bit not quite as punctuated, not quite as, not last as long as it has. And what did you make of what you said there?
Zero special attack, Ivy.
Well, I'm really interested on a long term about what the answer to that is and will be and how it'll shift when we look back on things. But cast yourself back to March and April of 2020 when millions of people were suddenly laid off and the hole that was created into the economy, and policymakers had to make some decisions. And the Bank of Canada under Stephen Poloz had to make some decisions about what to do. And I think even if you look back on it now, would they have done it differently? I think you can maybe make the case that there was too much stimulus, that some of the government programs, the CERB and the wage supplement, were perhaps too beneficial to households. But what's the opposite of that? I mean, Stephen Gordon, the economist from Laval, was talking on a podcast today about, in the Great Depression, we saw 10% of jobs lost over 4 or 5 years. During COVID, we saw 15% of jobs lost in a matter of months. That fixing that hole was so important, and getting us back to a point where people were spending and doing, participating in the economy again, this quickly was almost unbelievable, unimaginable at the time. And I think if the trade-off was, if you're standing in that room and being honest with people and said, look, you can either keep a floor under everybody, maybe be a little bit too generous with government money to keep a floor under them and keep a roof over everybody's head and food in their fridge, but you might have to deal with 7.7% inflation down the road. What's the decision you make? I sure wouldn't want to be in that room. I sure wouldn't want to be the person having to make that decision. And how much government bonds did the Bank of Canada buying off the market? These are all really interesting questions, and I don't think we'll get a more fulsome picture of what really should have happened until we're out of the actual crisis, and we're still right in the thick of it. So, I mean, I'll be honest, I have a little bit more sympathy for the people that had to make those decisions in the midst of that unimaginable crisis and the predicament they were in.
Like you say, very interesting questions that are and will continue to fuel a lot of political debate as well. Thanks so much, Peter, the CBC's senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong. Hi there, and welcome back to this special edition of Power and Politics on the cost of living crisis in this country. A nearly 4-decade record is set today. Inflation for May sits at about 7.7%. And make no mistake, it's not just economic, it's political.
7.7% inflation, and it's Canadians who are suffering. Conservatives have asked and are still asking that the Liberals cut taxes and give Canadians a break at the pumps.
Affordability is a critically important concern for Canadians. That is why the Deputy Prime Minister, in a speech last week, talked through the $9 billion in support that we are providing on that basis.
When will this government understand that workers didn't cause this inflation? They shouldn't bear the burden of it, and they need help. When will this government send help to families now?
I'm so thrilled to hear the members opposite be so excited about childcare, because guess what, Mr. Speaker? There are 13 agreements right across the country that are helping families today.
It's time for the Power Panel to weigh in. Tim Powers is chair of Summa Strategies. He's in Ottawa, as our political commentator Kathleen Monk and Sherelle Evelyn, managing editor of the Hill Times. Here in studio with me, advisor to the former Finance Minister Bill Morneau, Elliott Hughes. He's now with Summa Strategies as well. Hi, everybody. We're going to get right into it. Kathleen, I'll start with you. It's such an important topic to so many Canadians, and it's certainly like every party has something to say about it. What are your thoughts on the government's current kind of communications around this? And basically, we empathize, and last week we told you what we had already decided to do, which we think will still work.
Oh.
They're playing a hard game, right?
Still
they're trying to push back on Bay Street, saying we're not spending too much, but they're also trying to ensure that they're are rolling out or recycling their programs that they announced in the budget to show Canadians and voters that they're doing something. But I think it's largely falling flat. I don't think it has the empathy. I don't think that it's connecting with Canadians. And I think the largest problem is that, as you said, it is political, but it's also a policy question. And I know it's a short panel tonight, so I'm going to say one thing, that we have to take off the policy blinders or the biases and stop the kind of corporate political groupthink. And we actually have to start asking ourselves, how can we solve this problem? I'm going to give you one quick example. Loblaws last quarter, last May, reported 40% increase in their first quarter profits. That's year over year, a 40% increase. When we look at the CPI, the announcement from StatsCan today, we know that workers aren't making that 40%. We know, in fact, workers' average wages rose on an hourly basis 3.9%. What's inflation, as you've been reporting tonight? 7.7. So workers are getting half of the rate of inflation, while a company like Loblaws is really doing well. Now, I'm not saying that's causal for inflation, but I am saying that the government could look at policy levers, take the blinders off, look at the policy levers, and charge some of those pandemic profiteers, those who are making the most, to feed back into the system.
It's interesting because, Tim, from one side you've got the NDP saying that's something that you could do. From the other, you've got the Conservatives saying give everyone a holiday, give them a little bit of a break, as we saw Joe Biden do south of the border today on gas. I think we have a quick clip of Biden. Let's take a listen to that before I get you to weigh in.
Today I'm calling on Congress to suspend the federal gas tax for the next 90 days. We can bring down the price of gas and give families just a little bit of relief.
It's so interesting, Tim, because he's saying that he's also calling on states to do the same with their portion of gas tax. What does that do you think, politically for the government here? Does it up the pressure at all?
It ups the pressure, but, back to your question to Kathleen, and I'll give you a specific example as well, like the one Kathleen gave you. It's a bit like, to invoke a metaphor of another big issue we're dealing with. You're sitting on the runway at Pearson Airport, and the pilot comes on and says, "Thank you for your patience. We're sorry for the delay." That's a bit like what the government's communication strategy is. And anybody who sat on the plane while they've heard that message is not feeling relief at that time. They're feeling angry and frustrated. The government seems to have an empathy deficit connection problem here. Maybe the messenger, maybe the time and the mandate, maybe the inability to solve the problem. To your point about Biden and Kathleen's example, as you know, I'm involved in a couple of small businesses here, a lot of whom operate within town, and they drive, they distribute goods, they go back and forth all day in vehicles, 3 of them. We would benefit, as would many other small businesses, with a drop in the price of gasoline. It would make a material difference. Makes a difference also when you look at how you find other efficiencies. So, those are real things that could happen now that could help small businesses. And I think the government, where I agree with Kathleen, needs to throw away the orthodoxy and the origin of the idea and look at what could help people now.
Sherelle, I'm going to get you to weigh in a second. I just want to pull up, if we can, in the control room, a board that breaks down, for example, what makes up the price of a litre of gas. This comes from the Ontario government's website. This is focused on the average price of gas. That's inflation around the world. Just shows you that's the first point. There's inflation everywhere. It's happening everywhere. There's another board that we have, if you don't mind, that we could pull up that shows actually what makes up the price of gas, just to give viewers an idea of how much, if there was a GST holiday, how much a liter you
my guess is going to be $5.
Let's say 23 cents. If it's about $2, that's what you're getting off. That's where you would see the relief. Sherelle, if you could weigh in, and if we can pull that board up whenever we get it, that'd be great. We can just leave it up for a bit. Sherelle, your thoughts on the back and forth around this and the government's response so far?
Listening to your earlier interview with the Prolisec Peter Pedruscatos, it was really interesting to kind of hear him say, well, we don't know if this gas tax holiday that's being proposed will help. As you pointed out, Canada, if in the U.S. It does end up coming to fruition, Canada would be the only country in the G7 that doesn't have such a measure. And the Liberals right now are just kind of saying, we don't know if it's going to work, so we're not going to do anything about it. We're not going to try. I mean, it's very much giving, bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them, right? I don't know if that's the message that needs to be heard right now, as what Tim was just alluding to. Yes, obviously, these measures in other countries, it's not necessarily, meaning that, okay, inflation's over. In the United Kingdom, where they have like wealth distribution taxes, they have gas tax cuts. You mentioned in Germany, these aren't places where inflation is lowering. In fact, it is just as high, if not higher, even though there are slightly different measures for them. So I don't know if the continual push for the status quo is going to send the right message, and it's kind of giving the opposition parties more leverage here to say, well, the Liberals aren't doing anything. They don't care about you. They don't care about your families and your struggles. But look to us. We're the ones who can help you here.
And it's interesting, Elliot, because just from a comms perspective, like the Liberals usually can read the room in that respect. Like they knew when the abortion issue came up, how to make, sort of leverage that. I guess I don't want to say it crassly, but in the United States or gun violence, things like that. Like this is, you'd think every poll in the world shows how important this is to people. Like, have they sort of left a bit of a vacuum for the opposition, as Sherelle points out?
I think they have. I think they're, frankly, a little bit spent on what's going on the Hill. They're trying to get a budget finally passed. They're trying to finish this last piece of legislation. You've got the Prime Minister who's off on a 10 to 14-day tour. There's a lot of other things going on. Unfortunately, Canadians don't care about that. This is the most important issue to them, so they need to focus on that. The challenge with the gas tax holiday, while it's very nice politics, it's actually terrible policy. It would actually probably lead to an increase in gas prices.
Which, like they're saying in the States, too. They're even criticizing Joe Biden, but he's still going forward with it.
He is.
Politically, he thinks it's maybe.
Maybe, but it's like a sugar high. It's going to be really nice for a couple of days, but by July, August, it's going to look not great. What I think the Liberals need to do, and what I think Tim and others have alluded to, is they need to go on a kitchen table sort of listening tour this summer. And they need to reconnect with Canadians and understand and listen to them and hear what their problems are. Listen to their pain and feel their pain. I think that they're missing that at the moment. They don't feel and they don't look empathetic, and they need to correct that soon because this is going to be the issue of the summer, and they're going to hear a lot about it. So that kitchen table tour, I think, is something they should give some thought to.
Okay, unfortunately, I'm out of time, so I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion.
Thank
Tim
you.
Powers, Kathleen Monk, Sherelle Evelyn, and Elliot Hughes. As we have been mentioning, we are talking all things inflation and the cost of living crisis, and so are you.
For the groceries, I'm just looking for the cheapest store so I can afford my food.
And if that keeps going up even higher, it's like
gonna be hard.
It is gonna be hard.
I think all the groceries, like everything has increased. Like it's not just groceries; everything has gone up, right?
Riding the bike more. Like gas is crazy, so that's really it.
I'm hoping that things will normalize soon.
Yeah, I think
I'm hoping the government will help more, so.
Canada's inflation rate hit close to a 4-decade high in May, 7.7%. What, if anything, can be done to curb prices and how long
7. I was
might
hearing
they
6.
be this high?
No, I was
Now
hearing
from
5.
Montreal, Jimmy
And then I was
Jean,
hearing
chief
6
economist
is
with
like at
Desjardins,
worst, and then I was
Scotiabank's
hearing
chief
it might be
economist,
7.
Jean-François Parot,
Now I
is
hear
in
7.
Toronto. Hello to both of you.
Jesus
Thank you very
Christ.
much for making the time. Mr. Jean, let me start with you. I think we had discussions in the lead up to today where we thought inflation might sit just above that 7% mark. This obviously exceeds those expectations. Were you surprised? And what do you think contributes to that?
Well, our view was for a 7.5% result, and it ended up beating our above consensus view at 7.7%. And when you really look at the factors, it's pretty much the same ones we've seen in the last few months. So the reopening effect, so a lot of pressure in everything that's related to travel, to restaurant, people re-engaging in those services that were previously locked down. You obviously have the effect of energy prices pushing the price of gasoline, the effect of sanctions related to the war in Ukraine, and just the general context of a very tight labor market that's producing strong wages, and that's filtering through to final prices. So it just keeps firing on all cylinders, and you have 75% of inflation components that are rising above 3% right now.
And Mr. Perot, when viewers look at these numbers and they try to figure out, okay, what does that mean for my life? And in particular, how long will I probably be facing this crunch when it comes to affordability? What would you tell them based on the data that was presented today?
Well, certainly, the desire to reduce our the cost of living is getting farther and farther away from our grasp.
That's clearly one of the implications of the results today. I guess the question that we still have is, how persistent is the strength that we're observing going to last? I mean, we were surprised on the upside. Are we going to be surprised on the upside next couple of months? Hopefully not. But the evidence accumulated, the accumulation of evidence over the last several quarters now is that we are almost continuously surprised on the upside by inflation. So if that continues, then, prospects for reasonably little relief. We don't think that's going to be the case. We think there are good reasons to believe that as we progress through the summer, prices will moderate, inflation will moderate and continue into next year. But right now there is if you're a household and you're filling up your tank, you're going to the grocery store, it's not a particularly encouraging situation.
I'd like to ask you both about some of the political proposals that have been put forth to address the cost of living and sort of your analysis of them. Mr. Jean, I'll start with you. The idea of a holiday for example, for the GST portion or one federal portion of the tax on fuel. Do you think that would be beneficial? What are the upside and downside risks there?
Well, there are upsides in that it would help particularly more vulnerable households, people with lower incomes, better able to get by, of course, given the pressures they've been feeling from all sorts of directions. So that would be clearly the advantageous side of that. But the problem is that it would help just about everyone, and even the high-income individuals that might have a very significant savings buffer to help absorb those cost of living increases. Now, of course, the downside is that it does mitigate the demand cooling effect that inflation actually produces, and that helps solve the problem in the first place. So what the Bank of Canada is doing is raising interest rates to engineer exactly that. But if we start to provide relief, or at least too much relief and too broad base, it's just going to keep fueling inflation. And then in turn, the Bank of Canada will probably have to hike even more, and that could risk precipitating a recession.
Mr. Perreault, one of the other parties, the NDP, is proposing extra taxes on corporate profits and redistributing them through increasing the Canada Child Benefit, for example, or the GST tax credit. Your thoughts on the upside and downside of that?
Well, I mean, the challengers measures that go directly to how corporations are run is that you're, impacting the ability or the incentives for firms to increase supply or to manage supply in the way that they see fit. So while it's appealing to think that firms are padding their margins by virtue of the fact that profits are rising very rapidly in some sectors of the economy, the reality is I think somewhat different from that. And if we were to force them to behave very differently, then you run the risk of, perhaps solving an issue in the very short run, but creating a problem a little bit later on down the line. So, on balance, I think those types of policies are probably not the right solution for the challenge that we're facing now.
Is there? I mean, you produced a paper. We interviewed you not too long ago about what might work. I guess because Canadians are sort of faced with this idea that it could just be interest rates going up, and that's a scary proposition for people who hold debt or who hold a mortgage. You were talking about government spending, for example. I'll just follow up with you, Mr. Perreault, and I'll get Mr. Jean to weigh in as well. Like, what things are out there that could help?
Well, it comes back to a point that Jimmy was making. The reality is that the only sustainable solution to bringing inflation down is to reduce the pace of economic activity. Central bank is trying to engineer that with higher interest rates. You can also engineer that by having a government that pulls a little bit of money out of the economy, so reduces their spending. If you were able to achieve that, you'd end up with perhaps a little bit of a lower rate of interest on the part of the Bank of Canada, perhaps a little bit less pressure on household balance sheets or household budgets. But that's basically kind of your policy set. You've got policies that are to bring inflation down. You've got to bring growth down to some extent. And there aren't that many levers to bring growth down in a kind of a controlled way. You've got interest rates and you've got government spending by and large.
Mr. Jean, your thoughts on that, and also just if I could get you to reflect for a second on looking ahead towards the next rate hike and what today's number might underpin for that.
Well, on the government front, I tend to agree. The only way to really have an impact is to put forward a restrictive fiscal policy. Now, the problem with that is that it's usually unpopular, and it risks, causing the unemployment rate to increase, or penalizing people via higher taxes, and we know that this is usually unpopular. So that would be the theoretical prescription, but in practice, it's very doubtful that we would actually see that. So that leaves the entire burden on the Bank of Canada, and for that matter, that's why we think they're going to hike by 75 basis points at the July meeting. We, in fact, think they should have done that at the meeting just passed in June. And as a result, I think we're going to continue to feel that pressure to be forceful. But the problem with that is that we have a very sensitive economy when it comes to interest rates, and the housing market in particular, which has already rolled over. So the risk here is that the Bank of Canada eventually overdoes it, and that we see more pronounced housing correction than what we currently expect.
Okay, lots to think about. Thank you very much, both of you, for your analysis and your insights tonight. Jimmy Jean is the chief economist with Desjardins, and Jean-François Perrault is the chief economist with Scotiabank.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/.
I'll be honest. Maybe this is the shell in me coming out, but I feel like the NDP have a pretty solid plan, all things considered. I feel like those two guys were like the thing is, the Conservatives are proposing a plan that's it straight up doesn't work. It'll straight up short term help everyone out a little bit. Long term, gas will just stay at the same price and never come back down, which is really bad. I feel like the NDP have a plan of what if we did something, what if we shuffled industry in a way that hasn't really been done before? And the response back is no, it could be bad. It could cause problems with how these companies run. They're not able to run make as much money. I don't know. It doesn't seem to make much sense. It just seems to be kind of common sense. I don't know what happens when you tax a company like Loblaws like that. What do they do? We don't know. But it's just so out of the paradigm in our political mindset that we don't even think about it. Man, I wonder what would happen if you decided to go after our companies like Loblaws to make them pay a lot of money. It's well, it could. It's hard to know. Maybe it could mess everything. It could they could leave. No, they're not gonna leave. Shut up. That was the original Cope. They're never gonna leave. That was the dumbest shit I ever heard. Anyway. Those are some good episodes though. I think I'm gonna get Gaslight to 15 and then probably call it a day. I think that is the plan. How long have I been going for? Ooh, even longer. I said today was gonna be an hour, and then it'd be an hour and a half. I mean 2.5 hours. Oops. I think tomorrow there might be not much of. There might not be any stream actually tomorrow. But then tomorrow's probably about. Tomorrow would probably be Bugsy, right? Honestly, now that we have Kulava, it's kind of no. Tomorrow we'll get Haunter, because getting Haunter is just exclusively good. No, sorry. We'll start off the stream by getting Haunter. Not tomorrow. This is probably. Yes, we'll start off the stream by getting. Why can't I remember the name? Well, we'll start the stream by getting Haunter. Then we'll probably take on Bugsy. Because Haunter just seems like... Haunter's just super broken. There's like no reason not to get it. Like, you get a ton of EVs off these Ghastlies here. Let's see how many EVs we gain on this level up here. Next level. Only 2. Nightshade, actually good move. Kind of, sometimes. It's good in the fact that, like, you technically guarantee kills. It's better than Spite all the time. But I would say it's better than Beatlook all the time. Let's up them to 15 here and see if it's scaled correctly. So it said he's 8 IV basically. Okay, kills 4s. Doesn't, not even close to killing 4s. Okay, so we kill level 4s now with Lick. Do I want to keep going? I really want to keep going. I love playing. I mean, I actually love playing this game so much. I really miss this game. Oh. Okay. Nah. I think we're doing it. I think we're calling it a day. Close chat window here. Close my Spotify. Time sync correctly. We're gonna save. We're gonna save a state as well. Save state number 2. Just to be safe. Close the game. That's it. Got nothing else. Tomorrow, that's crazy. You don't have to battle any of them. You just do Rocket Grunt. Let's see what the Bugsy fight looks like tomorrow. Like, what does Scyther look like? Scyther, it's gentle, it has 9 IVs. Oh wow, no, Quilava just kills it now. Like, it dies now. Oh, it has quick attack. It is technician boosted quick attack. Oh my god. That's so bad. Ooh, oh my god. Oh no. Yeah, like is nothing stopping it from clicking quick attack. Okay, we'll see if Sucker Puncher. That's so bad. That is so bad. That I forgot that it had quick attack. What do I do like last time? Is Rattata just kind of strong enough to just beat it? Probably. If Rattata's strong enough to beat it, though, then surely Kolava will be, or it'll be a Typhlosion tomorrow. Wait, yeah, hold on. We have to get the Typhlosion bot set up here. Get a little sneak peek for tomorrow. Is that like the coolest one? Which one do we like best? That one's pretty good. Oh, we need a PNG though. It's just this is so low res. It's a very cool image, it's just very low res. I like this best. This is a shiny Typhlosion. Damn. Not transparent. Yes. Has it been helped? Has it like done it at all? Sorry, this is boring. It's the end of stream, so I don't care. Wait, no, it's not. It's in. You didn't do it at all. Still not transparent. This looks like the exact same image again. I'll download the zip maybe. Bro, this looks like the same image challenge 2 times in a row. Okay, this website didn't work at all. Oh, it's so fucking frustrating. It's not a PNG. The background is not translucent. I think I used this one before. Oh, wait, no, fuck. I need it to be a... No. It needs to be a JPEG. Right? Wait, what's... J... Is Adobe gonna be the one to save my sins? Oh my god. No. Fuck. Fuck me. Okay. No. Nope. Just let me do it. No. Fuck me. Please, please, please. Just fucking let me do the thing. Oh my god, please. Fuck. Holy shit. Okay, we actually did it. Oh my god. All of this for like that. Now I gotta clean up my files too. Wait, can we look up how I beat Bugsy last time and what level I needed to be at? Let me go to like a Bugsy attempt here. One person watching. No one's watching. YouTube's lying to me. No. Okay, what did like a Bugsy attempt look like? Oh, is it like... Okay.
Yeah, fuck it, why not, dude? We're gonna die, but I want to die. Did you think it was really awarded?
No, I didn't think it was weird at all. What? Oh, you go Haunter.
That was Shadow Ball.
I understand.
Okay, it took it out. Yep.
I understand. You go Haunter so it can't quick attack you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Hello. I'm here though. Yo, what's up, man? I'm sorry. I'm just leaving the stream. I was just figuring out one final thing. One final thing for tomorrow. But here, I'll show you. Give you the team recap. Basically, the plan for tomorrow is making sure we grind up our our Ghastly into Haunter, so that it can beat Scyther, because Scyther is quick attack. So you just click Shadow Ball and kill it, and then you can switch into Quilava to do the rest, because we're doing Quilava attempts now. We're not messing around with Totodile anymore. Not worth it. So is it going Omri? What's good, man? Okay, basically you get basically get Haunter's Shadow Ball and you win. Yeah, that's like how the game works. I made it to Claire, and like Specs Haunter just sweeps. You just like put Specs on Haunter and it just like one shots all of Claire's team. But I quit for a year for no reason. I just got kind of bored of the challenge, and I had like 30 levels to get on a Dugong, and then I decided a year later to come back now and restart the run and try to do it. So we have some new strategies, but Haunter will always remain because the thing's just broken. There's no reason not to use it. It's so good in all fights. The fun one is like the fun like kind of weird Pokemon is Spinarak. And Togepi is just to guarantee get Haunter, and like you beat the first gym with Quilava, and then you get Togepi and send it in against Haunter. I mean against Ghastly, because it doesn't have any moves to hit you. You just throw balls and win. But yeah, that's the team. Sorry, sorry you came in at the end, but I gotta go to bed. I'll be back tomorrow. No, we said I'll probably won't be back tomorrow. I'll probably be back. I'll probably be back Friday. Friday, I'm gonna do a big stream. We're gonna see how far we can get. I think I can get. If we do tomorrow, I'm gonna get past Bugsy because I need like 33 Haunter. Shouldn't be that hard. Quilava's not that important. And then after that, we have to catch. After that, you have to catch Heracross, so you can beat Whitney's Milk Tank. Then you're set. You want me to do one more level? Okay, fuck it, dude. We'll do one more level. This is what you wanted. Can't kill this. We can only kill 3s and 4s right now. I'm using mouse because using keyboard controls can be kind of sketch and like accidentally clicking a different move that's not like. God, yesterday I did that a couple times. Like I think I started on attempt 33 or something, but I was just like misclicking. The worst was the Typhlosion attempt we ended on. Oh my god. I just put it in the wrong place. Okay, this dude left, I think. Still gonna get the level 4 for him though, you know, or for Omri. For Omri, whatever your name may be. Can I like I can't like just. Okay, whatever. Alright. We did your one more level, Omri. I hope you're happy. Now we're calling it a night. There won't be much content to watch tomorrow. I think there's like a couple Destiny videos I can watch. But that's it. This is almost 3 hours in the end. Fuck, I gotta go to bed. This is meant to be an hour long. It ended up being 3 hours long. Okay. Good night, everyone. Tomorrow, Ghastly evolves. We probably beat. I don't know. Okay. Go to bed.